Everyone, happy Monday. We're so glad that you're here to join us. We have Tiger Inspection, Home Inspection here today, and we have Mike and Bill, and we're going to talk about everything you ever wanted to know about home inspections, what's included. Please bring your questions in on the live chat. We will be live streaming and recording to our YouTube channel, LAER Training. And let us know if you have any questions at all. We want to make the most of this morning and get your questions answered. So thank you and welcome, gentlemen. You're on.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bill from Tiger Home Inspection. I am the marketing manager. Mike is what I am. Inspector supervisor. We're going to call him today. Just a little bit of history. We've been in the business since 1989. It's a family-run business. We have 30-plus home inspectors, Mike?
Yep,
right around 30 that run, either part-time or full-time. We're open 7 days a week. We have 3 appointment schedules, 8:30, noon, and 3:30. So there's always somebody available. It was started by the owners, the Rizzo family. Sean and Jay are currently second generation. His folks started it from their basement in 1989. Mike was one of the very first home inspectors that came on, and we service from southern New Hampshire, eastern Mass, out maybe 20 miles west of Worcester, and Rhode Island, the whole state of Rhode Island. And our inspectors live in the geographic areas that we cover. Okay, so there's always somebody close by to a community.
Cape Cod.
Cape Cod, of course, yeah, in eastern Mass, all the way down to Cape Cod, of course,
Even the Cape.
So we're all licensed. We have pictured reports, and we have a staff that our office is open, customer service, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day, so you can get somebody live on the telephone. It's not an automated service. So that's kind of a little bit of introduction into who we are, okay? And now Mike is going to go on with some of the technical aspects, and we'll switch back and forth between the two of us.
Yeah. I'll just give you some of the information on my resume. I started out, got out of high school, went to school, did what I was supposed to. Found out very quickly that's not what I was going to be doing. So I did about a year, and then I went out and worked construction. Eventually, I came back and attended Wentworth Institute in Boston, architectural engineering. Finished up what we thought was a big recession back then, and it wasn't. It was very small compared to the last one. But I had been working with an architect, and there was very little of that work. Friend of the family, the Rizzos. I'd worked in sales a little bit, so I was comfortable talking to people. I had the technical background, some hands-on. So I started doing home inspections. That was right around 89. So I get to work out of their basement. It was a lot of fun. I've been with Tiger since then. I was an inspector for a long time, probably 15, 18 years now. I've been inside as an inspector supervisor. I still do inspections. We call it kind of the Friends and Family program, people I know, special requests. I still get out there. The reason I do is home inspection changes all the time. It changes with construction methods, techniques, what people want, what they're getting. So I still want to get out there as often as I can. If, as a real estate broker, you may see me occasionally. We do quality assurance, quality control, and you might see me stop by, and we have guys who've been with us for 20, 25 years. I'll still stop in and see what they're doing and how they're doing it. So you might bump into me. I'm all over the map. And what I do now, I do presentations with brokers. I do continuing ed. In Mass, you're required, you'll see this in a minute, you're required to have 12 credits every 2 years, so I help put that together. Tiger puts together, it's called the Tiger Seminar Series. It's not just for Tiger home inspectors, it's for all home inspectors who want to attend. We serve about, I think about 75 to 100 inspectors per meeting. And again, once in a while I still get out there to do my inspections. So that's who I am, what I do. What we're going to talk about today is kind of the roots of home inspection, how it came about, and what we do and how we do it. So I do have a presentation, and what happens with this is the last, as part of our cycle, we have to do a presentation on regulations and ethics. So I just kind of, this is the last 2018, a few months ago we did this, so some of the dates might be, let's say, for the year 2018, but it's still applicable. So this is Home Inspection 266, that's the regulations we work under, 266 is your friend. So, renewal by the numbers. So, that's interesting. It's supposed to kind of come up as I hit it. It's supposed to slide and have all sorts of special effects, but we're not getting that right now. So we're just going to play right through it. So, date, it doesn't matter to you guys, but the date by which we have to have a CEUs, months of the renewal cycle. So home inspectors have to have 12 credits every 2 years. Now, we'll take a quick little side tour here before regulation. What we used to, a lot of home inspectors did, we belonged to professional groups. ASHI, NAHI, INTERNACHI. There were all sorts of professional groups. And the reason you do that is if someone wanted to know your qualifications, that you were maintaining your level of knowledge and skill, there was really no way to prove it unless you were part of a professional group. And it was a great thing. Get to meet a lot of the home inspectors, continuing ed, that type of stuff. With the passing in 2001 is when they passed the first law and regulations for home inspection. And what we found at the time is that when people called, there was a little less questions about who we belong to, but more about do you have insurance, which is required by regulation, and are you licensed, and continuing ed. So this has really kind of taken that position for a lot of guys. I'm still a member of the American Society of Home Inspectors. I still go to meetings. Still a great thing, but really it's kind of the baseline has become the regulations because there is required continuing ed. So as part of that continuing ed, we'll have people come in and talk about new products, new methods, changes in building standards, any aspect, anything that we'll see. With home inspection, it's almost endless stuff that you get to see. But out of that, out of the 12, each 2 years we have to have 4 hours of continuing ed that'll be dedicated to our regulations, including the standards of practice for each renewal cycle. This is a little dry, but what happens is every 2 years we get to go over our regulations, and what it does is it helps us to keep them in mind. But also, the real reason they put this in originally was if regulations with changes, evolutions, it takes a lot more to change the regulations than they initially thought. They thought there'd be small tweakings regularly. The initial, 2001 was the initial regulations. 2008, there were changes, 2010, and we just went through a pretty big change, 2017. The new regulations took place, it was the last day of 2017, so starting 2018, we had a new set of regulations. I'm going to talk a little bit about the influence and why that change took place. 1 hour, so we have 4 hours on the regulations, 1 hour on ethics, and that's something that required, should be dedicated professional ethics for each renewal cycle, whether it's ethics as part of the regulations or just in the general sense, good business ethics. We have 1 hour of that each cycle. Renewal fee, $25. That number, depending on how old your profession is, the numbers go up and down crazily in the state level. You're gonna move for me?
Try hitting the right arrow.
Oh. All right. So, what you have right here, this was back in the end of 2015. Charlie Baker had come aboard as governor. And what we'd run into with the change in the regulations, he'd got to put a moratorium on any changing. We had been working on new regulations for an extended period. I'm on the board. I should have mentioned that. I'm on the Mass board. I'm not here today as a member of the board. I have to qualify that whenever I speak publicly. I am not speaking for the board. I'm speaking as Mike Healy, Home Inspector. The regulations were, we had been working at kind of an evolution for quite a long time. This document, Executive Order Number 562, was really kind of a big deal. What Governor Baker did was he put the brakes on everything. He stopped all of in the divisional licensure, regulations, all that stuff just came to a halt, and he had us look at them and relook at them. And basically what it said is that if you had one regulation in your, as home inspectors, but it was already defined in another, you should try to cut this down and just get rid of all, redundancy, that type of thing. And it really was very effective. Our regulations did reduce in size. We didn't think they really changed in effectiveness, but they did reduce in size. So there was a lot of work involved. It took quite a while. There was a big moratorium and all sorts of stuff went on, and progress wasn't made, then it was made. But this was really a big deal because it really got rid of a lot of the, over the years, little things kept being added to the regulations. A lot of them were very small, kind of off in little different directions. It's much more, I think it's much more compact and much more to the point now. So that's That's just a little kind of bump in the road. That's just the rest of the regulations. All right, so this is really kind of the crux. This is, you know, what we want to get to. The one thing you want to get, if you get anything out of today, is that home inspection is a consumer protection law and consumer protection regulation. I go through this when I speak to brokers and home inspectors. A lot of the home inspectors, when they hear that you're on the board, they say, how come you don't do this to protect us? Why don't you, why do we have to inspect, fill in the blank? Because if we, there's always problems with that. It's hard to inspect. If we didn't have to do that, it would be so much easier. It's a consumer protection law. When there's changes made, it's to benefit the consumer. It's not to benefit the brokers, the home inspectors, or anyone else. It's to protect the consumer. So the reason that the way that this came about, and that's what we're going to cover here, is it says in the beginning, a crack in the foundation. The crack in the foundation is the name of a study that was put together. I have to grab my spectacles for this one. It was in 1998. Yep, 1998. And what happened is, my understanding, I haven't discussed this with Senator Jakes, but at the time, the way that it was understood is that Senator Jakes, there was a house, I don't know if it was a neighbor or a friend, house was for sale. They had it inspected, they found a bunch of stuff wrong, they fixed it. Didn't buy it, went back on the market, had it inspected, found a bunch of other stuff wrong that wasn't found in the first inspection. So they had it fixed, and it was kind of this cycle. So what happened is they talked about it, they said, these home inspectors, they're not regulated, there's no one overseeing them, we don't know if they have qualifications. So they took action, and it became a study. It was named the Crack of the Foundation's results, and this is, if you take a look, you'll see that a lot of big names there. So Senator Jakes, Havens, Roberts, Headland, Pacheco, Tolman, those are all, so they were all involved in a report, the Senate Committee on the Post Audit and Oversight. And it was basically, they were looking into home inspection, and this is what they found, okay? In 1993, Elizabeth and David Smith, there's going to be different examples that influence kind of the direction where things went. In 1993, Elizabeth and David Smith decided to buy a home in the historic section of the town of Shirley. The house was inspected prior to purchase. During the inspection, the home inspector noted that there were several areas of wood that were damaged due to rot. The floors were sagging, and there were cracks in the walls and ceilings. His report also stated that these conditions were normal, and at no time did he mention that there could be signs of a larger problem. 9 months after purchasing the home, the couple discovered that the house was built directly in the ground, and it was in an advanced state of decay. The structural damage to the house was too extensive to repair. The house will have to be demolished and another built in its place at an estimated cost of $189,000. So remember, this is a long time ago. $189,000 might get you, I don't know, maybe a Tesla today. But it's, they were going to tear down the house and rebuild it. But that was, an example of it. And we're going to kind of just work through some of the different. This is the results of the study. A home inspector gave the wiring in a home an A rating, which indicated the wiring was functionally as originally intended. The inspector also told the potential buyer that the wiring was copper Romex, a brand that is guaranteed to last a lifetime. It's a little bit of a statement. After the buyer moved in, he discovered the home was wired with orange extension cords. The estimated cost of rewiring was more than $8,500. And that's not something that's completely unheard of. I've gone to a house that was rewired with, he bought a spool of extension cord at Home Depot. It's the same stuff as extension cord. This guy was an engineer, and he knew what he was doing. And he did a great job. It looked great, but it was yellow extension cord. It was the right gauge. It was 14, 12 gauge, but still. A potential buyer noticed an unusual odor coming from the basement and asked the inspector if the smell was coming from the boiler. The home inspector assured the buyer the boiler simply needed to be cleaned. A week after the closing, a new home heating technician informed the new owner that the boiler had oil leaks in 3 separate areas. The estimated cost of replacing the boiler was more than $3,000, and again, that'd be closer to $10 today probably, though home inspectors aren't allowed to quote pricing. All right? Now, you have to, part of this as a home inspector, when I look at these complaints in hindsight, I get, you know, these were not home inspectors, they were not engineers, these weren't architects looking at this stuff. You know, like this complaint, a boiler doesn't leak oil, it leaks water. The oil line might, there's a whole bunch of, you know, things that don't make sense to me in this, but it's the overall feeling. It's the fact that, you know, someone bought a house and they really don't feel like they got service out of the person who inspected it for them, and this is what was going to bring about these changes. Oh, I think I jumped one. Yeah, this thing's... I'm just going to skip back for a sec. Okay, good. In 1996, an inspector gave the outdoor siding, windows, and floors and toilet of a Medfield home an A rating. After moving in, the buyer found that the siding was rotting from water damage, the windows would not shut properly, the floors were warped, and the toilet did not work properly. The estimated cost of replacing the siding was approximately $20,000. The buyer won the maximum and small claims judgment of $2,019 against the inspector. So this is this is at the time, this is kind of the vibe. A recent article in the ASHI Reporter, so this was back then, ASHI being the American Society of Home Inspectors, a professional organization. A monthly newsletter of the American Society of Home Inspectors further outlined the potential conflict of interest between brokers and home inspectors. In the article, the author wrote, "What is marketing? Marketing is anything you do to get or keep a customer. Remember where your customers come from. Don't ever forget that buyers come to you through referrals from real estate agents, mortgage brokers, attorneys, and other affiliated groups in the real estate industry. In the home inspection business, we have two basic customers, the real estate agent and the home buyer. The home buyer really wants to purchase the house you're inspecting. The goal of the home inspector should be to assist the buyer and figure out a way to get into the house and not to convince them to kill the deal. If we can do this, then we'll have two very happy clients, the real estate agent and the home buyer." So this, but you have to understand where this is coming from. This is 1998. And what this is, in Massachusetts, Massachusetts has it has one of the stiffest, you might want to call it a firewall. And that's the limiting the contact between particularly the listing broker and the home inspector. There's rules on both the real estate side, 87YY1/2 is their rule. We have similar, but it's just, if you're not a buyer's broker, and this is kind of what they're touching on, the people that put together the first set of regulations were really, really, really concerned about this.
But it goes back to what you said at the beginning, that it's a consumer protection law.
Yeah. So you have to remember though, this was pre-buyer's broker. So in the old days, it was listing and selling. And my understanding is, the fiduciary responsibility, whether you were the listing or the selling, was to the seller.
Right.
So a lot of people come in and just didn't, they buy houses a little more frequently now. Yeah. I think back then was it 7 to 10, but it's a little more often. But people weren't, the internet wasn't there, the ability for the knowledge, people really didn't understand the process. And it's, again, consumer protection, this is part of the answer to that. So this is in here, one, because it's part of this study, but two, there is kind of there's all sorts of little rules and regulations about that. They were really afraid that there was some sort of stuff going on. And I will say, before licensing, I don't know what went on. I did run into situations that I didn't think were on the up and up, and that was, with regulation, I think that it really did help to, you can't have someone who does this as a hobby anymore. You have to do your continuing ed, you have to have insurance, you have to be professional. There were people that, home inspection, everyone's uncle was a home inspector back then. So it really did make a difference. Personally at the time, I was much younger then, I thought it was just someone trying to reach into my pocket and have me, spend time at continuing ed. I wasn't a big fan of it. But once it happened, I got it. I really did get it, Oops. Keep jumping on me. Oh, no. Okay. Okay, so, sorry about this, guys. So, with highlights, and this is again coming from the group that studied this. In Massachusetts, anyone can call themselves a home inspector and immediately start doing business. unlike similar professions, there are no uniform standards of practice, code of ethics, or licensing requirements. There's also no regulatory oversight of the industry or profession. Let's call it profession. Since home inspectors are not regulated, they are not required to carry insurance of a bond to protect home buyers with legitimate claims of negligence. In fact, home inspecting companies often seek to contractually limit their liability to the cost of the inspection. That term right there, this is something that limiting liability. Home inspectors, we are still wrestling with this because that's something that it is not clearly defined in the law or regulations, and what it means is, in some states, if you do a home inspection, you're a home inspector, and you do a bad job, you're not a good home inspector, and they have a tremendous, the house has to be torn down, they can get the cost of the home inspection back. It says right in the contract. I will only be held responsible to the value of the home inspection. In others, they say that binding arbitration. In Massachusetts, they don't want that. They feel as if that's limiting the alternatives and choices of the consumer. Again, back to consumer protection law. So there's all sorts of ways so limiting liability in Mass, and we have asked as home inspectors for the board to put together something where it's a clear definition of what that means. It's rather amorphous, it's hard to get a line on, and we're still working on it, trying to figure that one out. But that's a big one for home inspectors to work under. In theory, I'm just going to go down this road. In theory, what it is, someone has a problem, and they're unhappy with the results. They get it fixed. Most home inspectors want, I'd like to see the problem before you repair it. Limiting liability, there's some question about, do they even have to let you see that? They can just get it fixed, and then it's your experts against their experts, which is really, really hard. You're trying to run a business, that type of thing. And that's what's being wrestled with right now. So we're trying to get to the bottom of that. There are no laws or regulations preventing a real estate broker from recommending a specific home inspector, creating a potential conflict of interest between home inspector's duty to his client and the need to maintain a favorable referral relationship with a real estate broker. Home buyers lack sufficient knowledge about home inspections, and the Commonwealth has not made an effort to educate the home buying public. Massachusetts should establish an oversight system for home inspecting industry, including a board of registration, standards of practice, code of ethics, licensing requirements. Home inspectors should be required to carry errors and omissions insurance or post a bond prior to obtaining a license. Home inspectors should also be barred from contractually limiting their liability. There's that one. A firewall should be, this goes back to the other. A firewall should be created between home inspectors and real estate brokers. Direct referrals should be prohibited, and real estate brokers who choose to provide home buyers with the names of home inspectors should be required to give the buyer a list of at least 10 licensed. So this was a proposal, rather than the whole list or what have you. The Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation should publish a brochure to educate consumers about home inspectors. And a real estate broker should be required to distribute this brochure to all home buyers when they sign a purchase and sale agreement. Something like that is out there. We call it the unicorn because we've never really seen it. It's been talked about, but. All right, so this is just this was just the very basis, the general laws, and I don't think we really want to go too far with that. But I just wanted to touch on how home inspection came to be. All right. Usually, at this point, what I'd like to do is just talk about the process of home inspection, if that works. Any direction in particular you'd like to go?
I already have another comment. You mentioned before about the visuals. So for people who are brand new in real estate, especially, can you explain how your inspectors do it? I'm presuming with an iPad or something. But the fact that the visual, the picture of the concern is there, and then the written explanation.
You mean in the report itself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what we and there's a few different ways that people integrate pictures into reports. You want to understand that pictures are not required. They're not required. There's still quite a few people out there who do just. We'll start. There's a couple different types of reports. There's the checklist, which someone has a checklist and they go through and they see each thing and they give it a rating of either A, B, and C, or 1, 2, and 3, or green, yellow, red, depending on what their thing is. So that's a checklist. That's at this end. What happens with a checklist is you do go through, you get to see a lot of it, you don't get quite as much explanation, but it is pretty, it's condensed, the information's there, and it's pretty easy to access. You look up what you're looking for and you get an idea of what's going on. Not a lot of explanation though. At the other end, in my opinion, is they call a narrative. And these are, if you're not fans of them, you might call it the baby book. What happens there is, home inspector does the inspection and he tells you a story about the house. He talks about the house, its location, where it is, and he goes through and each thing comes up and there's pictures included, you know, usually in the area that it's needed.
120 something pages?
It can be, it can be. So on one side you'll have the checklist, the other you'll have the narrative, and then in the middle there's hybrids, and that's called a modified checklist. And we use it, we think it is the best choice because the checklist gives you the ability to look something up quickly and get a good idea of what's going on. The narrative gives you an idea of the information that you've found, and then hopefully, you know, you'll give you a direction that you can move in to help address that. As far as images, they should be in the report. The way we do it is in the report, right near the issue that's being talked about. So let's say that, you know, there was a history of leaking at the base of the toilet, you know, which is not uncommon. The toilet's loose, the wax seal goes bad. So it could just be a picture of the staining at the base of the toilet. It would be on bathrooms, full bath, first floor. The picture should be right there. You know? Now, the one thing about images in a report, and some people put hundreds and some people put a few, and it's each inspector, each company will kind of decide how they're using them. Generally, we don't try to take pictures of everything you find because we want examples. You know, if you have a house that's had deferred maintenance and the trim, it's wood trim and it hasn't been painted in a long time and there's numerous spots in the bed, we'll take a picture of one or two of the worst spots and say, look, you know, you're at the point you really need someone to take a look at this. These are good examples of our concerns, but we're not going to document the whole thing because that could be a separate report in itself. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two parts to that. So for instance, if you had a home inspection and there was a leak, I had one in a house last year, there was a leak on a little line that ran from the furnace to something.
Yep.
And so the home inspector took a picture of that. Sometimes what you find is that the sellers are not necessarily in denial, or maybe,
Yeah.
but they had no idea. And so if, with the buyer's permission, if you share even just that picture and that one concern of writing, then you're bringing that to their attention and showing them where it is.
Yep.
Whatever.
No, it's just, you know, because we had,
You just had individual issues,
Yeah.
not the whole report.
Well, in that case, I would have done that with just that issue. Yeah.
we have 30 inspectors, and it was, what happens is we have a, you know, like me, you know, I've been there for 20-something years. We have guys who've been doing that a long time. And we did a modified checklist manually for a long time, and we had it down, and, you know, most of us had good handwriting, and that's how we did it for a long time. And it really was something, you know, some people really click with technology, others don't. It took us a long time to get there. Contrary to popular belief, you know, computers save time and computers save money. Most of us found it did take longer to do our inspections with computers, but if you ask any of our guys, would they ever go back? Not a chance in the world.
So another point on that.
Yeah.
And in fairness to the inspectors, and tell me how you train them.
Yeah.
I've seen inspectors say, okay, we're done with the outside of the basement, I'm going to take a few minutes. I would think that they need to stop at certain points so that they can catch up on the notes they want to make.
I'm going to touch, I'll get right into that. So what happens, you know, with us, we finally get everyone up to speed, you know, on computers. There are still companies out there, and I mean, I trained a lot of the guys, you know, over the years. There's still companies out there that still do modified checklists, handwritten. They're still out there, you know. This is a profession where you get everything from practically movies down to the baseline stuff. So your question again was exactly you
Well, as I said,
the method. So the method.
No, taking the time, explaining to the agent and the buyers that the home inspector needs to take a few minutes to catch up on what he's done so far.
Completely. That's the way that I train.
Yeah, do you want to start with just how you would do a home inspection? You wanna just go
Well,
through that?
that's where we are right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
so we're back
but in
on
the be-
track.
But in the beginning,
Yeah.
what do you
Yeah.
tell the
And
buyer?
it's-
What do you say to the?
Yeah, and there's
Yes.
two parts to that too. It's the overzealous buyer who's asking you 10 million
Yes.
questions
Yeah.
and wants to keep
Right.
going.
Yep.
And we as the agents could be helpful in that and say, let's look at the knobs on the kitchen counter while he does his work. You know, just letting him, because the more he can get the details down on paper, the better the report's gonna be anyway.
Yeah, that's exactly the, and that's kind of carried over with us. That approach is carried over from when it was a handwritten report, and you really wanted to kind of get it and put it down and then move on. There was a big question with us as a company, not, you know, as a profession, but company with us is, we liked the handwritten report in the sense that it was finished at the end of the inspection. This is, if you're new or broke, you might not have even experienced it, but it was done at the end of the inspection. It had to be done. Now, it did usually take more time. You tended to be there longer, but pretty much everything was wrapped up. What we had found with our research, you know, other companies, the industry, the profession, you know, we go to national seminars, that type of thing, was there's a little tendency for people to kind of information harvest, which is they may go out, home inspectors, they'll go out, and especially if you're taking pictures, you'll take pictures of everything, but you don't have to stop and put as much of it down because now you have these little place markers. And so there was a drop. Our concern was that the guys would be out there, they'd do the inspection and not spend the time. Do the exterior, stop and download. Do the basement, stop and download. Do the living space, stop and download, wrap it up with the attic, and then go over it. And that's the template that we really work with. It's just like you said. And the reason is, even as a home inspector, you train yourself, you find all this information, you put it down, you do kind of move on, and that information just stays. So we like it when they take that break.
Right.
Exterior, a quick break, sit down, put in the important stuff, finish up what you can, you know, do what you need to do, you personally, then do the basement, the same thing.
Can they actually set that expectation with the buyer when they first greet them? And say, I'm gonna do this and so, and then I'll take a few minutes?
So, just to role play, hi, have you been on a home inspection before? No, you haven't.
No.
What we're gonna do is this is how I approach it. You know, if you've been on one, it's a little bit different, but the way that I approach it is we're gonna start off outside, we're gonna start off down low. I'm gonna work, now I got here a few minutes early, not too long, but a couple of minutes early, and what I've done is just kind of walked around and get comfortable with the house. And I'm gonna, you know, I wanna know what's going on and you know, kind of how I'm gonna approach it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start off down low. I'm looking for termite, carpenter ants, settlement, movement, grading, shrubbery, everything that's kind of down low. So we're gonna do a lap around that way. We're gonna step back. We're gonna roof gutters, chimney. If it's a bigger house, more involved, we may even end up going around again to just, you know, the body of the house and then the roof. If there's a garage, and then I'm gonna stop and write. And that's exactly what, if you know, we were at the inspection, that's exactly what I'd say.
Yeah. Another point to that.
Yeah.
So again, as we're trying to help educate our agents that are listening,
Yeah.
I try to always go at least a half an hour early to
Yeah.
be on site, so that if the home inspector gets there early, that I'm there as a representative.
Yeah.
So that he can walk around.
Yeah.
the-
We don't expect it. Everyone leads busy lives, and especially, let's say we have an 8:30 inspection. That's one of our times. I mean, when we get there, I'll pull up, take a look around, and I'll go knock on the door. And if anyone's home, I'll say, "Look, I'm the home inspector. I know you're inspecting it. I'll be out in my car unless it's okay if I just kind of just walk around a little. If the sellers are there, they're trying to get the kids to school, all that stuff. Whatever they want. Whatever they want. That's their house. We're guests. We wait. I love it if people show up a little bit early, but you know, it really does help if you're there, just because you don't always know. Some people don't want to sell their house. Some people are selling for different reasons. It's sometimes, you know, as a broker, you're the person who pretty much knows what's going on. You know the real story. So, you know, so it is, I think it's a great idea if everyone gets here a little bit early. I want on time. I want to be there early. You know what I mean? If everyone's on time and I'm early, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because that time, I do want a little quiet time with the house by myself. You know what I mean? I like to get there and just kind of see how it sits in the yard, it's the grading, you know, take that, you know, the micro and the macro look, step back and look at it from a distance, get up close and zoom in a few things, but just to get a feel for it. Because then you're gonna start to, the other thing about it is I don't wanna do anything before the client gets there, the buyer, because if they don't see me doing it, I didn't do it. You know, and later on they'll talk about, you know, this was wrong, and so we talked about it. If you're not there and they don't share the experience, this is a consumer protection law, and this is an educational experience.
So to that point, we talked about this a little bit before. You might be able to, or your inspectors might be able to judge pretty quickly if it's a buyer's very first experience. But I sometimes will tell the home inspector, this person's never owned a home before, or this person has owned 10 homes, because even though, I mean, I like the point that you made, that part of it is the education of the systems in the house, but you might make your statements and descriptions a little differently to someone who has never seen a furnace or a hot water heater before.
Well, I'll give you, to take it from the other end, the first question is, you know, have you been on a home inspection before? So have you owned a home? That gives us a baseline. And then sometimes talking, you just kind of, you know, I'm just curious, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm an engineer. So I know I'm on a different ride than if, you know, I'm an attorney, or, you know, I mean, I'm a heart surgeon. So you kind of do, you know, that's not a guarantee. That's the other thing, is, you know, from doing this long enough, just because you think something doesn't mean it is. But usually, I've never owned a home, and I'm a technical person. I'm not a technical person, and we do try to adjust. In the big picture, I have people who are the other end of the spectrum. I have contractors who will call us. You know, they use us, and most of the home inspectors will have one or two people that they know, contractor types, and you get out there and they look. I don't know if I'm going to tear this place down or not. There was a house in Wellesley. It was a little bungalow. It was nice because I don't know if I'm going to build off of it, or I'm going to tear it down. We're in the basement halfway through. The sill's just devastated, termites. He's like, we're all set. It's coming down. So there are people that, I don't do the same inspection for him. He doesn't want to listen to me talk about how the boiler works. He'll tell me, come on, let's go. So there's different strokes for different folks, but I always start off I always assume, and we train people that way, that I assume that they don't know anything and that they do want to know. Now, you notice I said they don't know anything and they do want to know. There are times when they don't know anything and they don't want to know. And that's really hard. We call it the three-strike program. I'll drag them back in and make them looking inside the electric panel. And I'll drag them back. And if you keep, and you've been there, you keep doing it, and they're over there doing other stuff, and you know, and at some point, I'll do the inspection, and then we'll go over the report and call me with any questions. I mean, but our duty is to really try to get them to experience the inspection, so they learn from it and they remember us doing it. You know.
What other people at the inspection?
The family?
Yeah, like the family.
Well, can I just take a quick little, I'm gonna take a little quick detour.
Yeah.
And we'll come right back. Mark that.
Mark.
Okay, I should talk to this as part of regulations, and I'm sorry I did.
Yeah.
What does it take to become a home inspector in Massachusetts? All right? I mean, just any ideas? Any guesses at all?
License.
Well, no, but what do you have to do to get the license?
Class, study,
Yeah,
classes.
we talked a little bit on it. So what happens is this. Someone calls up, and we get calls all the time. Usually it's I'm 56 now, so I can say. Usually it's a 55-year-old contractor. He calls up and he says, I am so tired of carrying shingles on roofs. He goes, I think I want to be a home inspector. That's good. First thing you're going to do is you have to find the course. It's a 75-hour course. Number of places offer it, not a lot. It's kind of a hassle to become a home inspector on that level because there's enough demand that some people offer it, but not all the time. 75-hour course. You have to take the National Home Inspectors Exam, which is a national test, and it's geared, it's geared a lot of states. It's pretty much the baseline that most states use for testing. So take the course, pass the test, and this is where it gets a little tough. You have to find a licensed home inspector and work under him or her for 1 calendar year. Back it up. You have to work with them and do 25 directly supervised inspections. So what that means, the way that we look at it at Tiger, because there are some other interpretations, is this. You're going to take a test, you're going to take a course, you're going to take a test that's going to kind of prove what you learned in the course. Then you go out and practice. We have them go out twice a day, 5 days a week, for as long as it takes. And this takes months and months and months. And what happens is they start off just a fly on the wall. They kind of watch what goes on. Then they start to do the inspection. They'll ride along with the inspector. One day the inspector might say to them, why don't you do the outside with the client? And he's there to make sure they do it right. Next day they do a little bit more. So this is months later. And then once you do the whole thing, that's the first of the 25. And it's called directly supervised inspection. So we do it so that they grow into it. Okay? What happens is once you've done the 25, you now get an associate's license. Okay? After you have an associate's, you have to still work with a licensed home inspector for 1 calendar year and at least 100 inspections, but it's called indirect supervision. And what indirect supervision is, I don't have to be there with them every day, but I do have to check reports. I'm there to be, especially now with phones and stuff, you get a call and say, look, what is this thing? You know what I mean? We've never covered this in class or seen it, any place in the courses. So you have to, he can be out there and do inspections as an associate, but it's indirectly supervised. So for 1 calendar year, if he does 300 inspections in a year, it doesn't matter. If he does 80 inspections, it's going to be a year and more until he gets to that 100. So course, test, practice, 25, associate license, and then a year and 100 inspections, indirectly supervised. Then you become fully licensed. You cannot have your own company. You can't work on your own as an associate. You can't do any of that stuff until you're fully licensed. All right? With education, just a quick slice on that is, there are a couple of companies that come to town, and they'll do, it's an intensive course, it's, a week and change. You meet the standard, you get the 75 hours in. I'm not in love with it unless you have a technical background. We have guys who are like builders, and that's perfect. They just need a review, and they take the test, and they're fine. We have a lot of guys, I'm a software guy, I'm tired of being in the software corral, I want to get outside and meet people. He probably should take the course over a semester at night, so he gets more input, more exposure. So those are the calls. I get calls all the time, and I kind of have a little quiet time with these people, try to explain and try to put them in the right direction. But that's what it takes to become a home inspector.
Wow.
Now, where does this tie back in with you? Your questions. The reason we like the way we do it, people always do like the way they do it, is because for months, this trainee is going to go out and experience the home inspection world. He's going to get to meet the firefighter, father of an only daughter. All right?
Yeah.
Okay?
No.
Okay? Love firefighters. Okay? But what I mean is, he has 2 or 3 other jobs that all involve building houses, and the only house good enough is the one he builds for her. So you're going to meet that. You're going to meet the really nervous first-time buyer. You're going to meet the person who's owned so many. We have a friend whose mother, she just bought her 12th house. It's a guy, Joe Murphy, for Braintree, if you imagine that. And he goes, you know what we gave her for Christmas? We gave her a calendar with a picture of each house, the last 12 houses. So this, and you got to do an inspection with her, and I've done 2, 3 with her. She's a great client, but she knows already.
Yeah.
She knows. She just loves to buy and sell houses. But she shouldn't do it. She always finds a reason she's not happy, just moves on, which is perfect. We all love that. She leaves happy, she moves in happy, But we have all sorts of different people, and the reason I wanted to go down that little dead end right there is to let you know that I think a really big part of training, and I tell people, we get these guys, women and men who call, I've been in construction, I'll be a great home inspector. No. Our best inspectors are intelligent, great with people, and they're curious. And the reason I say that they work out best is, we have a guy that's worked with us, he's been with us for years now. He was a really high-end cabinet maker. His father was a really high-end cabinet maker. That's all, he goes, all I've done since I got out of high school, even in high school, he said, for the last 25 years is write numbers. He said, I haven't written a sentence, a paragraph. Part of our training, he was 7/8. He was 7/8 done. But we had to go back to English 101 because he hadn't put together thoughts in sentences and communicate verbally great. Always he dealt with customers. He had his own business, but he said I just didn't do it. He goes, his small business. His wife held the office stuff. So what happens is when you talk about the different type of people, they have to interface with the inspectors. Part of the training, they get to see all these different types, and we try to prep them for when they get out there, they're ready to fly. Theoretically, with the way our licenses, the regulations are written, you could do 25 home inspections with no training because there's no real requirement for that kind of training period, and you could be released out there, but someone else's name will be on your license. So that's how we think it should be done. There are other variations on that, but we think that's pretty effective.
Next question.
Yeah.
So again, as we're live streaming, we're recording this for other agents,
Yeah.
can you explain some of the difficulties that you run into with different types of homes, such as when you're doing a condo, getting access to the common area? Because, for instance, it may be the agent's first time and they don't know who gains access to that kind of thing.
Yep, no, I've been doing this long enough that home inspection was new. And licensed home inspection, I'll be honest, in the very beginning, some good old school brokers, they were hostile. Because you're just sticking your nose into what's been a fine business for all these years. Yeah. And what we'd find, particularly with condominiums, initially, my favorite was, I was at this, was a development that was pretty well done. And it's, a U-shaped townhouses. Everyone parks in the middle and there's townhouse, townhouse, townhouse. And we're talking about the unit. In this one, the roof was back in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a problem with a couple of companies had defective shingles, and there were obvious signs, and they were defective. They used a fiberglass mat, they didn't expand and contract well, they'd crack, break, and then fail. The building, this was relatively new. They all had the same roof, so it was the same shingle. That building had failing shingles. Well, the reason it failed is because it was the southern exposure. It got more heat. Their unit had a different exposure, so the shingles hadn't failed. I bring that up, and I just got flamed by the broker. Why are you talking about that building? This was back when home inspection first started. I explained, this person owns a slice of that roof. It's an association. Everyone chips in.
That's true.
So the way that we look at it is, we don't do, when I go and do a unit, one of those towers, I can't do an engineering study on the outside, but I just look around. We want to see if there's anything blatant or obvious. We want to make sure that we can help out that way. We really zoom in on the unit, but we want to just take a look around and see what we can find on the outside. So, with condos, as far as access, in the beginning, it was kind of more of a hands in the air thing, like how does this work? Most people have it down now, most brokers, but like you said, in the beginning, sometimes new brokers might not know that, they're supposed to have access. First thing I'll say is we come in, if it's apartments, I'll say, there's a management company. Why don't you give them a call? We're going to do our thing, poke around, see what we can do. Sometimes there's a board member, if it's a condo association. Sometimes there's a facilities guy. Even, townhouses, sometimes there's someone around who has a key. So if we're there, I can keep busy.
So can you explain to the agents what you need to have access to the common room for?
So if you're in a big enough condo, it's a condo complex that they have. We even take a look at, I'll take a look if you have a parking spot. Sometimes they have underground parking, sometimes they don't. I'll just go down and take a look. I can't look at that whole garage. It's a gigantic underground garage. But why do I want to look at their spot? Well, sometimes the spot will have, it might be exposed up above, and when it rains, it gets wet. Concrete minerals come through, they drip on the car, they wreck the finish. There's pipes that leak above it. There's been signs of repair. So I like to see parking spot if I can. Storage, because a lot of times they have storage areas. Same thing. You get, and it turns out that there's pipes that go through during the summer when it's hot out. The pipes are cold because there's fresh, cold, clean water in it. Condensation drips on everything. There's little things you look, or is there a history of flooding? So we want to see. I like to try to get to the parking and storage if I can. If it's a flat roof, love to get on the flat roof. A lot of places don't want you to because they're afraid we don't want you walking on it, especially some of the really high buildings. They just don't like the risk. Generally, electric closets. a lot of those buildings, every other floor roughly, they'll have a meter closet with the meter for your unit, and then any of the plumbing, the plumbing systems. So it's really the stuff you'd want to see in a house, but because it's housed commonly, you really just, a lot of times you'll go on a quick safari with the maintenance guy. He'll take you, say, where do you want to start first? You'll go, go roof, then go to the basement, see all the stuff you need, then go back to the unit and write it up.
It's a little more complicated than a single-family house.
Single family, it's all there, and as long as they haven't built up piles of storage, it should be available.
Question?
Yeah. And, there's some places that, I think it's right in the Brookline, right around Brookline, the Brook House. There's a big development, older places. You have to schedule, and most of the people who list in there, the brokers, it's not often that you get a new, they got it down in there. But they have to set it up with the maintenance people that you have a scheduled time, or else you're not going to see anything. So there are different, the bigger places.
Wow.
Most of the time, garden style apartments, that type of thing. Hopefully, people have that someone, because they're usually just the meter closets and the hot water tanks through the basement. There's not a lot of variety there. But we just want to get into, just like a house, the things, water in, water out, heat, hot water, electric in the structure.
And AC, the central layer.
Well, so big buildings, that would be, they'd have a tower on the roof, that kind of stuff. With smaller units, condos, that's always tricky. Once in a while, all of the compressors are on that roof over there, and you have to go through some hallway scuttle. But the answer is yeah, we do try to see the compressors if we can. Just a quick aside with that, testing AC, fall, winter, spring, it has to be basically above 65 degrees for a couple of days, even at night. Because one, if you test AC and it's cold out, it's not telling you anything, and two, you can actually damage the equipment. So you'll run into that the first time you're into it. You kind of shake your head, but we can only, we can't see a roof when there's snow on it. You can't test the AC when it's cold.
So how do you say that, if you were doing a home inspection now in January, how do you explain that to the buyer?
Do you remember 2015? I think that was the year. I think it was 2015, and we ran out of places to put the snow. So I did an inspection for a guy who's from England. So we get there, give you a home inspection. I think they called them surveyors back in England. And we go through it. He said, "So, are you going to shovel the roof? How are you going to see it?" And I was like, so that was easy. At that point, we got right into it. But at some point, people figure out it's New England, and if it's winter, there is a chance you might not see that roof. The way that we handle it, and again, this is not across the profession, everyone has their own approaches. The way that we do it is, like in 2015, I had a folder full of roofs I didn't see. And if I was in that neighborhood to do something else over the next couple of weeks, I'd swing by, it's clear. Front roof's clear, I hope the back roof's clear too. I'd take a look at it and then get in touch. The way that we approach it is we tell them, if it's up to our guy and he can do it on his own time, when he's around, he'll do it, there won't be any charge. If you want to meet us there and talk about the roof on a certain day at a certain time, then there is a fee. And the reason is that he could be doing an inspection that day, but he's going to come and meet you. So it's nowhere near the cost of an inspection, anything like that. But we do want to make, we let people know, we'll try our best to take care of this without costing anyone anything, and we'll get you the information. And that's really, it's really hard, because we had a host, the guy was really nervous, and it's clear. And the south side was, but what's the opposite of the south side?
Yeah.
The north side. It's clear. I went there 3 times. It went out of my way 3 times, and there's still snow. We want the roof to be clear. Like, clear isn't, most of it's gone, but the valleys are still full of ice, because that's where the damage is going to be, where the ice and snow is.
So what happens with that in terms of the PNS? You can't. What have you heard out there in terms of? I
only to hear the tail end of it.
Yeah.
It usually, I don't know if it ever makes it into that far. Some people, they'll say, but a lot of times it's like, we're gonna hope for good weather and get it done. But we've had people buy houses and never see the roof. It's just.
Right, the same with the pools, but
Yeah.
I don't know, if an attorney would have a whole bunch of opinions probably, but I don't think the bank wants that written in as
No, that's why it doesn't get in, because it's
Right.
not part of your standard contract.
or
I mean,
hold back because it wasn't a full inspection.
Yeah. So that is a real tricky one. you know, the snow on the roof. And we haven't really had since like that whole year was just, you know, nobody got to see any roofs. That's when the guys were coming down from Michigan to cut the ice dams.
Then we got snowshoes for all the inspections.
We have guys that.
Not laughing because it was like 8 feet.
We have no guys.
You had to walk around the house.
They were using snowshoes. And because I'm a supervisor, I get called off the bench. You know.
Yeah.
So what happens is we had a guy in southern New Hampshire who he got injured, and so for about 3 days I had to do inspections up near Keene. This was a few years ago, and I get up there and I was like, is this like Santa's workshop? And so I'm going around the house and it was a ranch and it had big shrubs, so the snow went from the roof to the shrubs down. And the guy behind it was a young kid, and I said, look, I hope you understand, there's a lot we're not gonna see. He goes, yeah, I get it. And I was just like, thank God. But it was one of these, you know, you put your feet in, and put them in. And what I always wore was, I have a big pair of Sorel boots, and I used to wear, you know, basically almost like a ski pant. But many of our guys who live in the snow belt, you know, kind of southern New Hampshire down out to Worcester, there's guys who have snowshoes, and it makes perfect. I've done it. It makes perfect sense. You can just walk out, get a look at the house. I mean, I try to get there at least a half hour early back in the good old days when it was snowy, and I would try to crush a trail around the house because people want to see it. They and you know, someone shows up in a nice set of pumps. Yeah. You know, and that home inspector humor. You'll have a broker, and whether it's a guy or a girl, and they'll have really nice dress shoes on, and it doesn't have to be snowy. It just has to be frozen. And you'll be working around outside, and all of a sudden you'll say, "Uncle, I gotta go in for that." You know, it can be anyone, but it's just appropriate shoes. You know, just keep the other ones in the car. Just swap them. I do that all the time. Swap the shoes out.
Can you talk about what isn't visible?
I mean, not accessible items. So there's not accessible due to personal storage. That's a big one. And I'll tell you this: taking the pictures. You know, we've been doing it for I don't know how many years now, but you know, in the past you'd say not accessible due to extensive personal storage, and sometimes people don't get what that means. So you go into an inspection, they love the house, and then when all the storage is gone, it's like a different house. I'm not going to use the hoarder word because I have a barn full of stuff. But the storage, so what will happen is I have a picture of a hot water tank. It's one of the new wall-mounted ones. And my picture's from over here. And what they did was, because they wanted the house to show well, they'd taken everything in the basement and said, we just put it in one corner. So it was like Mount Everest of personal storage. And I said to the buyer, I said, look, we don't have enough time for us to get to that. Yeah. And so you take a couple pictures of it. If someone has an inaccessible area due to that, if they make it accessible, we'll come back. And I mean, I'll try to do it, me personally, I'll try to do it as easily as I can. You know, can we meet at a certain time? Do I have to meet just the broker? Do we have to meet you? It kind of comes back to that again. But they thought they did the right thing by, the whole basement, we just moved everything to this corner, and it was like the water line came in here, the gas line, everything was that corner, and it's like...
So can we talk about that for a minute?
Yeah.
As the listing agent, this is part of your prep for the seller, not only to have access to the workings in the basement, but also if your only access to the attic is the scuttle in a closet.
Above the fur coat, don't forget there's a fur coat.
Yeah.
And it's mineral wool insulation, so that when the mineral wool falls in the fur coat, the only answer is special dry cleaning. Who's gonna get that one?
Yeah.
We know who. We get the call.
So we had an agent in our office who was selling a beautiful new little home in Lowell that was a rehab.
Yeah.
And the buyer herself, she was doing a home inspection. I said, well, she's looking around going, where's the access to the attic? Whoever did the rehab had just boarded the whole access up, never did a pull down or nothing. She ended up not buying the house.
In years past, it would happen once in a while. This is more than once. The answer was the builder. It happened at least, I think, 2 or 3 times. The builder, I built the house for my mother, and she always hated that thing. She always hated that scuttle. She always thought something was going to come out of it, like even in the closet. And you're supposed to have one, you know. And he goes, so we just finished the closet. I just made her happy. And then so you run into those, and then occasionally you will run into the kind of the quick and dirty flip, but it's not something that usually the local inspector will, we need to go see the insulation, ventilation, wiring, whatever's up there. So the answer is you really need reasonable. I mean, for a little guy like me, some of the access hatches, you'd be surprised what we can get into. But you want them to be reasonable, because the harder it is to get in, the less likely a homeowner is going to check on things. You want to, every year or two, there's people who don't go in their attic for years and years and years. They don't charge rent for the squirrels that are up there.
But you might as well, can you talk about that for a minute? When you go into an attic, what are some of the things that you're looking for in general?
So, right off the bat, the big ones are insulation, ventilation. That's really kind of the crux of, that's where other things. So people, you're in an attic, and the first, one of the big ones is there any signs of any growth? Now, home inspectors, we do not, and are not required to inspect for mold. Mold inspection is a whole different certification. You notice I don't say license. They do not license people in Massachusetts to inspect for mold. They certify them. The people who certify them are professional groups. They are not part of the government. So the big one is, how's it look up there? I have a friend who, fill in the blank, had this, that, the other thing, they had to have it cleaned. So the reason that generally happens is because of an imbalance between the insulation and ventilation. So the big one we're looking for, it starts outside. We're doing the outside of the house. We're looking around. We look at the roof. What kind of venting do you have? Do you have a ridge vent along the highest point of the roof? Do you have soffit venting up underneath the eaves, the overhangs? Do you have gable vents? The old, older style where the air goes end to end. So initially we look to see, we see ridge vents all the time. The roofer put them on. The roofer charged for them, but he never cut them out.
Yeah.
So we see that happen more than you'd know. So we get up there, we're looking at insulation, ventilation. Where does the bathroom exhaust fan go? One of the biggest culprits around. They put the, originally when they got those, it says, oh, we got that steam out of the house, it's great. They were blowing it into the attic. Then what they did is they think, well, that's not good. So they'll take it and they'll stuff the hose down into that soffit, down into the eave. That doesn't work either. It really needs to vent outside. So we're looking for, insulation, ventilation, how much insulation, how's it's installed, what materials, ventilation, and then obviously structure. Joisting under, if there's flooring, it'd be under the flooring, joisting, rafters, collar ties, roof backing, what's going on up there. Then you can move on to
Damage, water damage of any kind?
well, leaking,
obviously.
yeah, leaking. Roof penetrations, water usually starts at the vent stack, the chimney, the bathroom exhaust fan, something like that. The other thing, you can have a kitchen exhaust fan, bathroom exhaust fan, you can have ductwork for heating, electrical. I grew up in a Campanelli slab. Familiar?
Yep.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
you guys?
Chelmsford.
So Campanelli he actually was from the South Shore, but after World War II, he came back and he kind of stole the plans from, in California where they were building all those ranches. A Campanelli slab is a house built in a concrete slab. Ranch, usually generally big overhangs. He had a couple different models, straight, L, and then like the super deluxe with 2-car garage. The heat was in the floor. It was like a hockey rink in reverse. It was the early form of radiant. Just put copper pipes in the concrete. That would heat the floor up. No basement. And because they were really low, a torturously small attic. So I had to get my little friend Paul to insulate it one hot summer day. It was my mother's house. And it was just, there's a lot nice about them, but they're very, what are you looking at as far as concealed? I mean, you got to get up into that attic. They use truss work, so up there was all sorts of crisscross and structure. You got to get up there and do your thing. Campanellis are a whole other thing.
There isn't any Campanellis watching, is there?
No. There could be. They still that big get together.
We apologize.
So what would happen with those, just to kind of wrap that up, is what would happen is this happened at my parents' house. They put you go into one of these and the boiler is in the kitchen. And you'll be there and all of a sudden it'll go boom.
They look like
It's like a small plane taking off in the kitchen. I grew up, it was part of my life. And it was like people who are from East Boston. They'll be having a conversation when the plane flies over and they stop talking. Plane goes by, they just start talking again.
All right, we're free.
We were the same. We're the same way. And the kitchen thing goes off. Your friends will be like, "What's that?" And you're like, "No, that's the boiler going off." You know what's right in the kitchen?
Take it easy. It's just a boiler.
It's just a boiler. And it had a little stainless steel cover on it. Best place to dry mittens. That's where the cat would sleep. A lot of people's goal was to move it into the garage. But what happened is, eventually, because copper and concrete don't really play well together. The pipes in this concrete would eventually fail. So as a home inspector, if I go out spring or fall, particularly fall, and the lawn's brown except for this nice green patch right next to the house, that's because the pipe has a low-grade leak, it's hot water, it keeps it defrosted, and it keeps it fed. So you're looking for that. What happened with our house, it was the late 70s, slate was in. My mother had a friend of the family put down a beautiful slate floor, and the work on the floor changed kind of the dynamics. A couple weeks later, there was a wet spot, and he dried it up. And then our friend came back with a jackhammer and jackhammered the new floor. My mother cried. And he jackhammered the floor, cut out the piece of bad pipe, put a new piece in, and fixed it. But now that's an indicator. If it happened there, it's probably going to happen again. Well, she was there for another almost 20 years and it didn't happen again. But by then, she's like one of the last slab. Most everyone had converted to baseboard by then. You know. So that was, as kids, we loved it. Radiant heat. Modern houses, radiant heat. Radiant's the best. We had spots that, you know, my brothers and I would fight for the warm spot on the slate floor. You know, it was really great, except for it was engineered in the 50s. So that's with Campanelli's. That's their whole. And the reason I can talk to this to you guys, you know, wherever you are, is because he's in Middleborough, he's in Framingham, he's in Brockton, he's in Attleboro. I mean, Campanelli built everywhere. So you'll see them. And then there's people who work for him who stole the plans and did it themselves. So there's a lot of that around.
You said Chelmsford?
Yeah, I actually, they're a little different there. They put the utilities, usually there's a door on the exterior of the house.
That's right.
And that's the spin. I don't know if those were Campies or like one of his #1 guys who broke off.
But another thing, in the original,
Yeah.
they had, the refrigerator was part of the upper kitchen cabinet.
Listen, and what color was it? Pink. Ours was pink.
I thought it was turquoise.
No, that was the other option.
Oh, yeah.
So
I'm thinking
it
about
was.
it, yeah.
We bought my grandmother's house.
Miami color.
I need to tell you all this, but when we moved in, it wasn't the Jetsons, but you thought it was. And it was. So GE made it was. It was all cabinets. They were pink cabinets, and it was refrigerator, freezer. So it wasn't giant. And then we had the cooktop with the push buttons, and then the oven to the wall. And the problem was when parts for that went on the cabinets, it was great. We loved it. When it went, you couldn't get parts for that anymore. You know what I mean? So I remember when that all got ripped out, we had to buy a conventional refrigerator, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, I had one homeowner say it didn't last long.
No,
Yeah.
no. It was, and no one wanted to work on it. They were kind of funky.
And your mother cried again.
No, she didn't. The pink was slowly leaving the house.
Yeah, she was
And just
all
to-
set with it by then.
The other thing with the campies, you know, this is just stuff. Anytime you have a slab, doesn't have to be a Campanelli. Anytime you have a slab ranch or anything built on a slab, keep in mind limited access to pipes, whether it's feed and waste. Campanellis in particular, but a lot of times they tend to be less pitched to the waste lines because, you know, if you're in a house and it's 4 or 8 feet off, you know, off, the waste leaves the house here, but the bathroom's here. Campies, you tend to have a much shallower pitch, and all the local trees and shrubs are much closer to the pipes. We had a weeping willow in the back, which is just a 1950s dirty, nasty tree. But it would actually get underneath and into the cabinet under the sink because the water was there. And so anytime you have one of the slabs, you're careful of that. And then the big one is termites. Termites don't live in the house. They live in the soil. They come up, take a little bit of wood, and they go back down with it. They slow down from October to March is when they slow down because it gets cold, the ground freezes. But if you have a heated slab, they don't have to quit. They don't go on vacation. They work 24/7, 365.
Wow.
So with home inspectors that do campies, I'm very comfortable with them. I'm very careful about what I look for, how I do it. You get down low inside the house, you check the mop board, the kick boards, any place you can, because they're, you know, they don't have to go outdoors anymore. They're inside.
Excellent. Excellent, Michael.
When the guy who bought my mother's house gutted it, he was a friend of my brother's, he was an electrician, he said, "You gotta come over and see this." And I had found termites and had them treated. He gutted it, and they had eaten, because they don't have to expose themselves, they get into the studs, and had gone up, and because it's one floor, they were eating the joisting. And he didn't, he was, you know, he knew we couldn't see it. I was like, who's gonna sue us? You know?
Oh my
No,
gosh.
no, but that's what it was. So, this kind of goes back, we ended up down here because you had asked about not accessible.
Yeah.
So not accessible personal storage, that's one thing. There's not accessible due to method of construction. So if you have, you know, if you have a slab, I'm going to see almost none of the water in the waste lines. I'll note in the report, visible under sink, and, you know, in some utility areas, but you're not gonna see it. Underground electric service coming into the house. Okay, usually it comes in, you get to see it attach and come down, that kind of stuff. There's all sorts of different not accessibles. Not accessible because no one remembered to put oil in the tank. We can come back out when you get oil in the tank. Not accessible, the gas was shut off. You remember a few years ago when we had a lot of foreclosures. That was just, you'd show up and we'd hope that the electricity was on, we'd hope that the plumbing was on, all that stuff.
What do you do with those houses that are like winterized?
Winterized?
and then-
Okay, so what happens is we usually get a promise that they're gonna be winterized. They're gonna be de-winterized right before we get there. And they have this guy who's, not so much now, but in the day, he was out there doing 15 of those in a day. He'd go turn the water on, drain everything, the whole 9 yards. So we'd hope that he'd get there when they said, but we'd go there, do as much as we can. We can do structure, we can do windows, there's a lot of stuff we can check, but we're not gonna be able to check if the electric's off, you know, all that stuff. We're not gonna be able to check the systems. So then that becomes a visit, a re-inspection. And again, we don't charge full price for that, but we do want it, you know, our guy has to miss on inspection, so we charge to come back. And years, you know, at the peak of the recession, that was an ongoing battle. You'd get there, you know, back when we had all that snow, driveway wasn't shoveled, walkway wasn't shoveled, no one brought a shovel. Most of our guys have shovels. But you couldn't even get the front door open.
Wow.
And then you go in there, and it's colder inside than it is outside, because it's as cold as 2 in the morning in there. That was the tough one.
So one of the inaccessible things, I was thinking of things like the piping behind a shower
Yep.
in the wall. I mean, in some houses, they've cut a hole in the linen closet out in
Yeah.
the hallway for something like that. But we were talking in one of our other classes about when you go in a house and you see a brown stain somewhere. So you as a home inspector, it's gonna cause you to go, aha, I think I better
Yep.
try to find the source of this.
Yep.
So can you talk?
So, a big part of that, if you think about the process I talked, we start off outside, we come in, I download, we go to the basement first. I like to start low and work up, because things tend to leak down. And let's say you're in a basement with a finished, you know, it's a basement with a finished ceiling, for whatever reason. In the 20s and 30s, they did it because of coal fire, you know, the coal that kept the soot out and stuff. There are whole different reasons. But you get down there, and there's discoloration and staining. First thing I look at, and it's not etched in stone, but usually the older the stain, generally kind of the darker it gets. When they're new, they tend to be a little lighter, then over time they tend to get a little darker. Is it chronic and repetitive? When I see a stain, if it's big, little, big, little, big, little, it'll look like a cross-section of a tree. You know how you get the...
Oh, I see.
And that means that it's happened numerous times, not enough to cause damage. So is this the kids in the tub?
Right.
Is this the dishwasher that was loaded wrong? The filter was jammed. So we look to see if it's chronic and regular. Then, if it is chronic, is there damage to the finish material? If I look up here and I see a stain, is there enough water to cause the paint, you know, especially with latex? Latex is a waterproof skin. Sometimes it bubbles, they call it bagging. Sometimes you'll touch it and it'll be full of water. Sometimes the plaster starts to break down. If I have plaster or gypsum board starting to break down, you know that there's a fairly steady source of water that's water in my Boston R's. So you try to read it. There's nothing better than actually having it leak for you, or having a seller who says, look, you know, we let that thing go for years, but we put the house on the market, we had the seal on the toilet, the wax ring fixed. That thing's been, you know, that wax ring, he goes, every once in a while someone, you know, something would happen and it would leak, you know, you have that kind of thing. But we can only get so far.
Well, that's the other thing I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Again, this goes back to sometimes when you're walking around the house with the seller, looking at his home for the first time,
Yeah.
and you see a brown spot in the ceiling, and they say, oh, that was a leak in the roof, but we had the roof replaced 2 years ago. And lots of times, they have attended to whatever the problem was, and they never repainted the kitchen ceiling.
Just get a can of kills or bins, kill the stain, and then paint the ceiling. I'll give you the one that always gets us. Do you get water in your basement? Nope. Not since we put the pump in. We never get water. Well, once we put the pump, because we get the 2 feet of water, we don't get water. So do you get water? Nope. And you're selling it. So you want, you know, it's been 10 years since we've got water. But did you ever get water? Well, and it's just 2 different states of mind, you know.
Giving things up on milk crates, Mike? What is
Yes.
Well, no, pallets.
it? Pallets?
Listen, if you wanna store stuff on pallets, more power to you. I don't initially put that down. I have too many people who are smart enough to do that because it keeps the air moving underneath them. And I'm not gonna, say that this place is a wet basement just because, but I'm a little more inclined to look hard, you know? Did an inspection on a house, a broker that I'd known for years, and I said, hey, this place ever get water? He goes, no, never gets water. And what we look for, what home inspectors look for, if you have elevated, increased water levels, water is a perfect level. It goes up perfectly level, truly the word level is, a water level, and it goes back down. So if I get this window, this is a perfect example. When water goes up on glass, it leaves a dirty film, and then it goes back down. So we'll look inside the furnace on the enamel, because people will wipe everything down, but they never think about going inside the furnace. You look for stored windows, like storm windows. You look for the water tank. Anything with an enamel finish is gonna kind of show you that dirt line. So I'm at this house in Roslindale, and he says it's never flooded. And I said, he goes, no, back in 97, and I'm looking at the water tank. The water tank's from like 2001. And there's a wet line at about a foot. And I'm like, Jim, don't lie to me, man. He goes, what? And then he's like, do you remember? And this was in Roslindale, the city pumping station failed. And this whole neighborhood went under. And he goes, this house doesn't get water. And he meant it. He goes, the one time, he goes, you're right, that's what it was. Because, we get a date off the tank. The tank, it's manufactured in 2001. The water was up that high. It's had to happen since then, So there's all sorts of ways we can kind of get an eye. Favorite place to look? Under the basement stairs. No one ever goes under the basement stairs and paints the backside of the stair. So you look for those water lines, Be a wet place, But that's the, people, it's just as far as, ice damming, get some of the ice damming stuff, that type of thing, same thing. Have you ever had ice, well, no, we did this, and this, and we never get it anymore, It does, it happens.
Well, can you speak to gutter or not to gutter?
Okay, I went to school for architectural engineering, and that includes some architectural design, and it's always stuck with me that architecturally, if you're gonna go without gutters, kind of the standard is a foot and a half to 2 foot overhang. So that's like a campanelli.
Oh, interesting.
So a campanelli, I generally don't care, you can do whatever you like, but on the walkway, you're gonna have to put an old Yankee diverter or something there so you don't get wet walkways, so you get ice. If you don't have that foot and a half to 2 foot overhang, you're gonna do some work. What I say is, name your poison. Do you wanna get a ladder and clean your gutters, or do you wanna paint and repair your lower trim in your basement windows? Because the water's splashing down. I mean, I've gone in basements, and you're standing out looking at the window, there's a window well, and it looks like it was a fish tank, because it's full of water. That house could never survive without gutters. The gutters were clogged, the gutter overflowed, it filled the window well up, and you could have little fish in there. The window didn't leak, the window's nice and tight. Good job on the window install, keep the gutters clean. So the house has to, sometimes if it's an embankment house, it's got a big exposed foundation, people won't have gutters because when it comes down, it just splashes back against the footing, against the foundation. It's situational, but me personally, I'm a gutter guy.
Can you speak to the new, and I can't really say this properly, but the new water diversion that they're asking?
You mean with the way that it's beyond the scope of the home inspection, but the first time I ran into it was in Dedham, and I got there, and there was, the yard had been, it was a new house, the yard had been flipped. And what it was is they had the same, what they want to do today, it used to be that you had a house, you put gutters on it. If you were in the city of Boston, the greater area, the water used to come down, it used to go into the house, and then down into the city storm system. So in Boston, almost all the houses, up until recently, they took that water into the house and into the city storm system. That was the problem, that's what the whole big dig, water in the harbor, that whole thing, that's what brought that about. Then they started, people in the suburbs let the water in the yard. Then they started to have subdivisions where you had retention ponds. You know how
Yes.
you have the retention pond, so a certain amount of it was, now the goal is the water that falls on your lot, they want to kind of go into the ground in your lot. So it's almost, as far as,
away from the house.
well, you don't want it to be against the foundation.
Right.
But the whole goal, if you think about it, is, we're not trying to fool nature, but if we can take the water that was supposed to land on this lot and keep it on this lot, and everyone does the same thing, things are gonna kind of stay the same. You know, that one guy at the end of the street he's not gonna get flooded every time it rains because everyone's water just runs down the hill. So that's the goal, is to keep it kind of on the property. When water passes through soil, it gets cleaned. You know, that's what they're trying to do, is just make it part of the system. It can be quite costly. This thing I saw at Dedham was crazy. Everything went into the ground, and they ended up having to put almost dry wells in to make sure that the water would be contained and do what it was supposed to. So it'd be quite involved.
But, so you speak to that when you're outside. If, let's say they have old, whatever you call the pipes that come down.
Downspouts, yeah.
The downspouts, right. And if those have fallen apart or something, you'll speak to that and explain to them.
The big thing we run into, we've had people call and say, we've got water in the basement, get the report. Add extensions to downspouts, reassemble downspouts, move water away from the house. One of my worn out statements on my reports, the button's worn out, is work with yard grading and roof runoff to reduce chances of water entry. One of the first things I do when I get to that inspection, before anyone's there, I'll step back and look. And you have a house that's right here, and I'm at the front door. This was a little north of Boston. I stood there and I looked, and everywhere I looked, in Newton there was one too, all of the other houses were above me. Okay, and in Newton what happened was, real high-end neighborhood, this was the one brand new house in the neighborhood. All the others were the classic 20s and 30s, really big, beautiful homes.
Yeah.
Why didn't anyone build there? Why didn't anyone build there for 80 years? Because it's a pond. And so they called us, the folks called us back, and they weren't mad at us because we had talked about the fact that the grading and this and the whole thing, they wanted us to document it for them. And it literally, they had ducks like swimming up to the house. It was crazy. And that 3 of us went out to look at that one because it sounded so bad. And what it was is there was this depressed area, and all around were these beautiful old homes. And then someone finally got permission to build. They had a walkout basement to maximize the living space. So the water would come it was right up to the sliders, and then it went back down. Up to the sliders, and then back down.
Wow.
So as a home inspector, if I come into a neighborhood and you have a beautiful, well-established neighborhood, and you have the only new house, why there? Why didn't someone build there before? What was there? Is it low? When you come in, you're looking to see, do you see reeds, cat-nine-tails? Do you see trees that keep falling over because there's no good soil for them? There's a lot of stuff, ledge, things like that.
While you're on that subject, can you speak to new construction? How often do you do inspections of new construction?
I think not enough for the people who are out there. I think as the more competitive the market gets, we just went through a very competitive, on the sellers end. I think the sellers, they were driving the bus for a little while recently, and we may have spoken to that, you've heard of that anomaly where sellers wouldn't sell you the house if you're going to have a home inspection. Did you run into that at all? Yeah, it happens. So what happens is when just derailed there for a second. As far as a seller's inspection, the town does go through and it does inspect the buildings, but local building inspectors, town building inspectors don't really have, they don't have any skin in the game. It's very hard if there's a mistake and it gets found. It is really, really difficult. You don't turn to the town for, to be made whole. Sometimes they have very comfortable relationships with the builders. They have good builders who do good, listen, you did the right thing, that type of thing. So what happens is we do new construction. It's not uncommon to find things that need to be corrected in new construction. The one thing we don't want to do, we don't want to become the punch list. A lot of builders, what they'll do is they'll say, you're going to have an inspection? They'll say, okay, I'm done. He won't put together a punch list yet. He'll say, I'm done, have your inspection. And then what we find becomes the punch list. The way we look at it is this. The builder should say, I think everything's done and done correctly. Yeah. And then if you want to have us, we want to do the inspection. We'd like you to have the certificate of occupancy because that's always a hassle. If you don't have the CO, it means some of the major items may not be done. And if you don't mind, we have some people who they're fine if we come out and well, if you have to come back again when everything's finished, that's fine because it's a big investment. But we did have a period recently where we talked to
We were
people.
talking about that
Oh,
earlier.
were you?
Yeah,
Okay.
you know, in terms of
Yeah.
waiving home inspections or sellers,
Yeah.
you know, taking an offer that didn't have a home inspection.
I-
We don't recommend it, and
Yeah.
most of the agents that we spoke to would say, I would never do it.
Yeah.
You know, I had to do it in this case, but I would never do it.
The Globe did a good story on it. They had both sides of the coin. They had two real estate brokers, one who said, look, I work in very competitive part of, because it's really kind of a hothouse thing that if you're in those places where people are fighting over houses and condos, it gets really competitive. And he said, I work in those markets and I've never had a buyer who hasn't had a home inspection. And then the other person was, if you want that place, then you better do what you need to do
Yeah.
and not have a home inspection because they'll just sell it to the next person. I have a friend who lived through it. And he went to buy he was on Beacon Hill, and his son had inherited some money, and he was going to invest it. And he went to look, and it was, on Beacon Hill, there's some little places that aren't too nice just because it's Beacon Hill.
Yeah.
And he was looking at a condo to buy as an investment. So they went back and forth, and he and his dad, and they ended up getting it, the guy at the listing, and they sit down, and they said something on the inspection, and the guy just turned around and said, inspection. He goes, if you want an inspection, I'm not selling it to you. You know? Yeah, move on.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but that was supply and demand,
And we talked a little bit about seller's inspections,
Yeah,
Pre-listing.
pre-sale.
yeah, pre-sale, we do, those happen, pretty regularly. What I've found over time is that the kind of person, and I'm not saying it's a bad idea, I'm just saying that the kind of person who has a pre-sale is probably the person who doesn't need it. They're the kind of person that their I's are dotted, their T's are crossed, and things are in order. Because what happens is, they're the person, I want to make sure everything's perfect. And you get there, and sometimes, you do find stuff for them. But a lot of times the pre-sale, there's a broker I know who, I don't hear from her that often, but when I do, she uses me as a tool of sorts, and I'm fine with it. When the prices, this was a number of years ago, the prices had really gone up. This was in triple-decker country. And when the prices came back down, all the people who own the property only remember this price. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And these are usually family houses. This is in Dorchester.
yeah.
Family houses. They've had people go through these. The same family's been living in them for years. It hasn't traded hands. It has been good enough for you. It's been good enough for us.
Yeah.
It's all family. So what she'd do is she'd say, look, Mike, I just want them to understand what people expect today.
Yeah.
And I'd do the inspection, and she'd just sit down with them and say, look, this is the reason why it's not worth that anymore. That was a different time, and you need this. So there's different reasons people do it. Business-wise, sometimes if we do the seller's inspection, we probably won't get the buyer's inspection. Because they see the name and they're like, well, I'll have a different company do it because I don't want someone from the same company. That's happened occasionally. I'm not afraid of it, but that's,
You're saying the buyers, so
Yeah.
if they do have a
Yeah.
pre-sale.
if the seller, if they see a copy of it, because frequently sellers will, and the buyers will say, well, maybe we should use someone else just to get a second opinion,
I think that's part of that Boston Globe argument, is
Yeah.
that if you're the listing agent, you have to explain that to your seller, that even though you're being proactive in doing this, and you're getting a certain kind of information, the buyers have the right to get whoever they want, and that person may come in with different
Correct.
points.
Yeah.
Let's put
Oh,
it
yeah,
that way.
yeah. Well, that's the thing is you might, and we were starting to get some crazy calls during this last little time. Don't wear your uniform. Can you just walk through this with me?
Yeah,
And we're like, that's not ethical. We're not.
yeah.
So what they were doing is they signed that they agreed to buy it without an inspection, but they were going to have us just look around. So,
Well, we have had circumstances when they took the home inspection contingency out and yet still did a home inspection for their own education.
so what happens is that is not uncommon. We'll say, look, I can't come back at you for it. I can't come back and make any
Right.
requests or anything, but I do want to know what I'm buying.
Right,
And some sellers, people who do this, people who develop, flip, do whatever they're going to do. Some people are pretty hardline, and what they'd say is, no inspection means no inspection. Because once in a great while, what would happen is, you come in, you do the inspection, and the seller would be willing, the buyer would be willing to lose their deposit because what they found was so onerous. So some people who were selling said, I don't even want to deal with that. I'll get 7 people who want this. Why would I deal with your headache?
Yeah.
So, and that's, you know, capitalism.
So then, here's another angle on that.
Yeah.
So that person who's lucky that he won against 13 other offers,
Yeah.
closes, and then says, can you do a home inspection?
Oh, we get that, yeah.
Just so I can get an
Oh.
understanding of the house.
Well, what I explained when I get them on the, when we talk on the phone, I said, look, I want you to understand, we're not that kind of company. And what I mean by that, he says, what do you mean? I said, our guys are trained in what we like to do. We like to do home inspections. We do not like to be expert witnesses. When you are so disappointed in what you bought that you go after those people. So what we tell them is, if this is truly, you just want to be educated in what you have, we're there for you. If you think this is the beginning of a process to recoup what you think you should have got, maybe we're not the one, because we're not, our guys just, it's not, it takes a special person to be that person, and it's not pleasant, it's not enjoyable.
Good point.
And our guys just want to do, we want to do the best we can at what we do, home inspections. Because that's a whole nother, and there are guys that do that for a living. That's who you need.
I have more questions.
No, keep going, keep going.
Tiny question, what about covering the condenser for the air conditioning?
Top of the, you don't want to wrap it all the way to the ground, because then moisture gets through the, she's like, what?
Everybody does that.
No, but so what happens is, you can tend to trap moisture underneath it. It's designed for exterior use, so it's the quality of the materials. It's not really about being in the weather that's the problem. The inspection I did on a Friday, I said, Kim, look. And we shine it, and look, and the leaves are this deep in the bottom inside. So what you're trying to do is, in the off season when you're not using it, you're just trying to stop the leaf and debris from falling inside and making a mess. So you don't have to wrap it down tight to the ground. You can stop 6, 8 inches down. You can just put a rubbish barrel cover over it if it fits right and bungee it on. But the big goal is to keep stuff out of it, not so much to protect it. Just give it a little space at the bottom to breathe. You know? It's not that, listen, that's fine. If you overwrapped it, it's not going to hurt it that, you know, it's just,
Overwrap.
yeah. Too much protection.
I'm guilty of overwrap.
Too much protection. Yeah,
What
it is.
about inspecting a pool in the winter?
We don't do pools.
You don't
We don't
do
go near, it's funny, because in other parts of the country where pools are part of life, you know, California, Arizona, Florida, that kind of stuff, it's a major part. And in our National Home Inspectors exam, there's pool questions. There can be, how about this? What do you need to strap down your hot water tank against earthquake issues? What? So, because it's a national test, seismic questions, clay soils in Texas. So they get a couple questions on steam heat. They don't know what that is.
Yeah.
I went to a national meeting, and it was on hydronic heat. Now, hydronic means steam or hot water. The guy gets up and he says, okay, with an accent that I can't do. I mean, since none of us see steam, we're just not even going to talk about that. And so everyone from the East Coast, the West Coast, and Chicago was like, what? What? And because they don't see it. So there's some stuff, this is in the testing, some stuff we see, some we don't. But pools, we don't do pools. We feel that pools are fairly specialized, and that, certain people, that's the kind of thing someone who works on a pool should take a look at. And especially in the wintertime, that would be a whole other thing. The only thing we've had is guys who are walking along, and then all of a sudden they kind of sense that something's not right. They sweep it away, and it's one of those elephant covers, the green ones that stretch really tight. That's spooky, because you don't know the pool's there, it's under snow.
Yeah.
And what about outbuildings, sheds?
Sheds have become an issue in the last year and a half. What happened is the FHA, VA, they've been asking, we don't know if it's to bring value to the property to make the numbers work, but what happens is, if there's a shed in the property now, and it's usually, if it's a real piece of junk, no one really wants to talk about it. But if it's a plus, if it's on the plus side, they'll want us to look at it. And we charge a minimal fee. I forget, it's a couple bucks. And we will take a look. The problem we have with sheds, and we explained it endlessly, is most sheds are not really built to a standard. You know what I mean? Sometimes the shed was built by the guy that lives there, sometimes it was delivered, sometimes it's not built to the same thing as housing. So what standard am I inspecting to? We're all trained how things are supposed to be built. You go in sheds and the stuff that you see is crazy. What we look for is it leaking? Is it level? Is it infested? Is there termites, carpenter ants? So we will look at them.
So that leads me to, when you call to make the appointment,
Yep.
someone is asking you
What,
if,
yep.
if there's outbuildings?
Yep, what happens is they'll go through, the whole, and they'll say, is there anything, any other areas that you might need inspected, that type of thing. By regulation, we don't have to inspect unattached garages. By regulation, you don't, okay? We do. I mean, and I think most home inspectors do, because, if it's a garage,
Yeah.
but then you get into those weird things where it was a garage, and now it's a man hangout, and and it's got a bathroom, but there was no permits pulled, and so, depending on what happens, sometimes it's like you have to call an audible, you get there, and you'll decide then if you can put something, sometimes you just tell them, look, this thing is so not approved, I don't want to put anything down, you decide what you want to do about it, but I'm gonna, if you want me to inspect it, I will, but you're not gonna like the outcome.
So another question while you're making the appointment is,
Yep.
The person will ask us whether we want a radon test.
Yes.
So can you talk to them?
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
Oh,
Hand it over to Bill.
Oh, can I hand over my?
Do you have a
Yeah.
a vial?
Yeah, we do. We got vials, we got, there.
Yep.
Okay, we're gonna talk about radon for a few minutes. So this radon is the natural decay of uranium. So it goes from uranium to radium to radon gas. It goes from a solid to a gas and actually back to a solid, in case there's any scientists out there.
We've been corrected before.
We've been corrected before, which,
It's called a sister,
and that's like,
element. Is what it's
that's one of those questions, are you a scientist?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so when I go over this, and they start reciting the tables, we just say, let's not get bogged down with that right now, all right? But it's a dangerous gas, it's a carcinogen, and it is, it's radioactive, all right? So what happens is, it's found in rock, ledge, for the most part. It's also found in soil though, but predominantly found in the rock and the ledge. So as we go up north into the hilly sections and we go out west into the more hilly, mountainous areas, from our testing, you find more radon. From our testing, we have about 5% overall in the city that comes in high for radon. As we move out to 128, 20% between 128 and 495, 30% of the homes, and then after 495, about 40% of the homes test high. So, and that's all by our own testing. The counties, Middlesex County, Norfolk County will have their averages, but they really don't coincide with ours too much.
You know who has a great map is the EPA.
The EPA has a good map.
They have a
for
nice
it,
colorful map.
They do, it's colorful, yes, but it also shows about, like Middlesex, they show about 18%.
Yeah.
And that's not in my testing.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of testing on this, so.
But what I thought was interesting though is they do show that band. It gives you an idea. The numbers we may question some of the
Correct,
numbers.
yes, yeah.
But what happens is they show there's a band that goes from west of Boston through like Stowe, and it arcs up into southern New Hampshire. And it's a band, there must be a band of stone there that the numbers are clearly elevated. So, people say, is my town a radon town?
Yeah.
There are no radon towns.
No, there isn't, no.
I do inspections in Quincy, with a Z as they say, south of Boston. And it's, that was the Granite City, the quarry's there for years. They sent granite all over the world. I'm on Quarry Street in Quincy, we test for radon, and it's fine.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be. Everything, we're surrounded by granite, it's rock everywhere. And then the house next door might come up with a positive number. So what I've told people is, it's like the Cape. Oh, we never have radon on the
is the
Cape.
same. Oh,
No,
absolutely, yeah.
it's all sand. No, it's not. Underneath, the reason the Cape's still here is because there's some rock under that sand. So it's not that cut and dry. A house here, a house there, and it depends on how that house sits on that lot and what they did to prep it.
But part of it, and I think, again, the education for our agents is we should be very cautious and careful not to give an explanation. We are not the experts on that. And when clients will say to us all the time, should I bother having radon tested?
Right.
It's not for us to advise or to...
Very good, Susan. Very good. I only say that because so many times I've run into it with agents. in terms of, and I'll just share one quick story. I believe it was in Bedford, and it was a condo complex, and they were on slabs. And there was a broker who had been in the business, Mike, for 40 years, and said, you know, I've never seen anybody test a slab before. Yeah. And besides, there hasn't been any units in this complex that have come up high. I said, well, the buyer ordered it, so that's what we're going to do. We'll use the radon monitor for that one. That'll go over here in a few minutes. But it came up 54 in the unit.
Now she knows her number.
54, and this is their living room. Now, we all came back. Everybody was there. Both families, everybody. The seller's there, and I said, you know, I'm looking at the monitor. Everybody's looking at it. Saying, you sure this is right, 54? And I said, listen. I don't know, the stars are aligned a certain way. It's never failed me before, but who knows? Maybe come up with an errant number, you know. And so I said, I'm going to put another monitor in here and come up 56. So, point
So
the question
brand new
is,
agents listening, tell them what
brand
the
new agents,
standard
just
is,
do a radon test.
and tell them what the standard is.
Okay, so the standard is, so as I said, it's natural decay of uranium. So over a lifetime of exposure, though, this isn't, I guess it's similar in, you know, from a visual point of view, secondhand smoke type of thing. So it's not, I have high radon, I'm running out of my house. It is over a lifetime of exposure is the best anybody can come to, okay? So what does that mean? 20, 30, 40, 50 years? Are there exceptions to that rule? Absolutely, you know. So you'd rather not have it than have it, let's put it that way. So it comes in, the house basically sucks it in. The house is like a vacuum cleaner for air, and it sucks it in, and it comes into the basement, and then it doesn't escape, if you will. So the basement doesn't exchange air as frequently as these, what we call breathable walls here. So it has a tendency not to collect, but it just takes longer to dissipate. So open air will dissipate radon, okay? So outside, it measures on a national average 0.4 on a national average outside, okay? So what happens is if you were to open all your windows in the basement, radon levels would come down, all right, if you kept them open. If you just opened them and shut them, nothing would happen, all right? But if you kept them open, radon levels would come down. So we're doing what we call a closed house test, best we can. Right?
How would you treat that if it was found?
Okay, so we'll get right into that. Thank you, because that's where we're going. Okay, so we just want to make sure that the levels are high. The standard EPA is below, it's measured in picocuries per liter of air. Some say picocuries, whatever you want. Mike, what about you?
Pico.
Pico? All right, I'm going with pico. Picocurie, less than 4.0 is low probability of any health risk, okay? And by the way, when we're testing, when I say we're testing in the lowest possible living area without major renovation, all right? So if you go into a basement that looks like it's livable, and we're not talking about code or anything, we're just saying if it looks like it's livable, you should probably do a radon test. So that's where we're going to do the test. If it's a crawl space, we're not going to do the test in the crawl space, because nobody's ever going to be there. So we're going to do it on the first floor. So lowest possible living area, okay? So we got two separate methods. We have the vials, which the home inspectors, liquid scintillation vials, which the home inspectors all carry. It's a little kit, and what you do is you take off the caps. They come right out of the box. You want to make sure that the vial hasn't expired, Mike. Like these. Which is one I just used.
No, I was just like, why do you waste the radon test?
Yeah. Which I just noticed myself, actually. No, I don't know when they started putting these on, but I don't like it. They didn't inform me. No, anyway, I was using this as a sample. So what you do is you just put it down in the basement. You put two, because they're 4 inches apart. And one is a quality control measure over the other. It used to be just a single kit, and it was a way for the labs to sell more vials too. You know, so if one number came up, people questioned it. Now you have two vials, so if they come up similar, then that's what your number is.
They have to be very close.
Some will take an average. Some people will take the highest number. It just depends on what you do. Okay, now
Canisters too.
The ones that
used
look
to
like
have the
hockey
canisters,
pucks?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
The kids were using those for hockey pucks, so they decided to get away from that. Yeah, so they went more towards the vials. So the problem with the test is, the pros of it is it's a very easy test to put down, and the home inspector will typically put it down, and then an agent will come back or somebody will come back, write up the sheet of who it's going to and whatnot, put them in This little box is gonna self-addressed, drop it in the mail, okay? It gets to the lab in a couple of days, and then you get your results online after 24 hours, 48 hours maybe?
Yeah.
Okay, so you got that method predominantly probably used right now. This is the electronic method. So let me back up just a little bit. One of the problems with the vials is you can't tell if windows were open. So somebody could have left a door open inadvertently, left a door open or a window, and you don't know. You know, so even though that's, oh yeah, go ahead, Mike. Yeah.
Well, that was the, we were talking about slabs, that type of thing. I did inspection on a slab ranch.
Yeah.
And I put the radon kit, because there's no basement, we put it in one of the, it was actually in a bedroom because people were living there, and that was the room that we could maintain standard conditions as best we could. And I forgot my flashlight, I forget what I forgot there. And it was in my hometown. So I drove away, and I'm like, oh no, an hour later I go back, all the windows are open in the room.
Oh, wow.
All the windows. And I said, we talked about, you know, the hang. Oh, I didn't know you meant the windows.
Yeah.
That was and we don't get water either, you know, so.
I thought you said the doors.
Yeah.
We actually have a question. How does the actual mitigation system engage on the pipe work?
Well, I mean, that's,
What do you mean engage in the pipe work?
it doesn't,
Okay.
the mitigation, the radon remediation or mitigation system is a standalone system. It doesn't tie into the house waste lines, supply lines, or any kind of plumbing. What happens is, if you think of it like a sump pump, they cut a hole in the basement floor, they dig down, they put crushed stone, they put the pipe down into the crushed stone, and then they seal the floor. So what happens is, that pipe goes up, usually outside, runs up the side of the building, there's a fan in it, and that fan constantly sucks the air out from under the basement slab. By doing that, they create this pocket of negative pressure, so all the air under the slab is drawn towards it. That's just the way a sump pump works with water. As long as that pump's taking water away from one spot, all the other water will move towards it. So it takes the air from below the slab before it can get into the living space, moves it above the roof line, that's the destination of that white pipe. But it looks just like a vent stack on a house, which is part of the waste system, but it is a separate and it should be isolated system.
You meant tie into the current,
Yeah, does it?
the
I don't-
current piping?
yeah.
No, it's totally separate.
Is that the question?
Yeah, it
I
must be,
believe
right?
so.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Mike.
Is it appropriate that if you're showing a home that has a radon mitigation system in it, that you
Yes.
say, oh, this is a good thing, there's one already in place? I mean,
Yep.
I suppose maybe we should
Of course.
just not say anything, but is there anything that would cause you to have it inspected, or is there maintenance to
Okay.
it, or?
Let me do it then. So, it's recommended to test every 2 years. It's
Ah.
recommended to test for radon. This is what I tell people, buyers. So let me back up just a little bit before we get into this. So the electronic monitor is going to give us, it sits in the basement, the same as the vials. We put it on a tripod, but anybody can put it on a desk or whatever, but we want it, you know, at least a couple of feet basically off the ground, okay? So it's going to sit there for 2 days, just like the vials do. And it's going to take hourly readings of picocurie numbers, which is the radon. It's going to take a temperature reading for every hour, humidity reading for every hour, and whether it's moved, unplugged, we'll have an asterisk next to that hour. So it'll give us the minimum that the radon level was for 1 hour during that period of time, as well as the maximum for that period of time. So basically we'll say the average comes out to 2.5, then the minimum was 0.5 and the high was 4.1 maybe. Okay, so you have a range. So all we go by is the average on this, but it gives you more information, especially with windows and doors. If you see sharp declines or inclines in humidity and temperature, then we know, and the picocurie numbers followed, then we know something happened during that test, okay? So this is starting to become more of a preferred method, especially agents love it because they don't have to go back and get the vials.
Well, but it's quicker too.
And it's faster, you get the results.
It's
Who
two
goes
days.
back?
We do, our technicians do, either
Yeah.
myself or the technicians, but we get the results right then.
Yes.
Now, we also can book it 2 days in advance to the home inspection. So we'll place the monitor there and we'll get the results at the home
Oh, that
inspection.
makes sense.
Yep.
So bring a laptop, some of the techs have printers and they'll print it out. Okay?
What does the gauge on the pipe measure?
Measures the static pressure inside the pipe. It's
So
not picocubic.
It actually senses vacuum.
Yeah, the
It's
vacuum pressure, yeah.
So what happens is there's a fan in that pipe, and when you look at, usually it's, that little blue water that's in the plastic tube that should always be uneven, and that's telling you, if you think like a straw, there's someone sucking on the other end of that tube and it's keeping it out of balance. The day that fan stops working, the water levels will come to even, and when it's even, it's time to call the company that installed it and have them put a new fan in.
Right.
So
It's just a visual gauge
Yep.
to show the system
Yep.
is working.
But it's measuring suction.
It's measuring the suction,
vacuum.
and the suction should basically stay the same as the day that was installed,
Yeah.
frankly. And they'll put a number on, there's usually a sticker on that pipe, when it was installed and what the vacuum pressure was.
Yep.
So that's not a gauge for radon, that's simply a
Yeah.
visual gauge to show you the system is still working. So to get back to the question a little bit, that you had a little bit earlier, Susan, was, I have tested, I would say probably out of 100, 1 to 2, 1.5 systems don't work even though they look like they're working. So when you say, should they, it's got a mitigation system in place. First of all, let's back up again. If we get a mitigation system in place, is that a radon problem? Is that what you asked originally, I think? Is that a radon problem?
Is it-
Oh, no, I always say that's a positive, that
Yes,
it's already
correct.
Yeah.
there.
That's a solution.
Yeah.
So everybody else on this street that hasn't done a radon test in 2 years has a potential radon problem. Your house has a radon solution,
Yeah.
This particular property. Okay, so that's what, especially when bios will call me and ask, they'll say, no, it doesn't, especially if they're foreign, they'll come over and say, I don't know anything about this radon. Why does this have a system? Does it have a problem? And that's how that's answered.
How much does that remediation system usually cost?
Average around $1,200, depending,
Yeah.
depending on what you have, but just a single family home, single pipe with a fan, that's what I hear out there all the time. It can be competitive.
Well,
Yeah.
what happens is if you think, again, I always go back to a sump pump if you had much exposure to those. If you have a nice little Cape or ranch, it's a little tiny footprint, square, nice square print. You put one pump in the ground, you're probably gonna take care of it. When you start to get into kind of your McMansions that'll have a main basement and then an L and then something else, depending on the square footage, the shape, there's different areas, they may need to put more than one hole in the floor. Sometimes they'll pull them to one pipe, sometimes they won't. But it just makes sense, it's a percentage thing. If you're getting this much radon out of this area, the chances are you're gonna get more, so they need to address it.
Another question is, so if you were aware that it should be inspected every 2 years, who would do that reinspection?
We would.
Okay.
Anybody, yeah. Yeah, well, if it's the homeowner, this is what I tell the buyers. Look, if it comes in under 4, that means low probability of any health risk right now. But the EPA recommends you test every 2 years, which nobody ever does, and if you do, you'll be the first one to ever do it. And you'll get the recognition for it. You'll be Googled.
Can I go down a little rabbit hole?
Sure, go ahead, Mike.
So this kind of comes to, there's actually two. The standard for testing is there's an EPA standard. You can get a booklet online, or you can get one, one in your hand. But the EPA has 2 versions. One is called a home buyer's guide. The other is a home owner's guide. And the difference is this. If you're a home buyer, they understand the situation that everyone involved is in. So what happens is, this 48-hour test is really a rough test. It's a very rough test. What they're telling you is, we understand that you need to find out your situation. You only have 7 to 10 days usually, inspection window. And we all know that we can't hold this thing up forever. If you get the homeowner's guide, you look at it, what they're gonna tell you is, you can get a canister that measures for 365 days, or 6 months, or 3 months. And you can do, there's a lot of different testing, whole different protocol if you own the house and you're not going anywhere. Because seasonal changes, weather changes, there's all sorts of things that affect. Think about it, you live in your house during the summer, all your windows are open, maybe you're central air people, I don't know. But during the winter, it's buttoned up. So there are things that influence the way this reads. So as a homeowner, you'll have a different set of guidelines than a home buyer. The home buyer is a compromise. I tell this to people, look, we can't tell these people to move out, button this thing up for 4 weeks so we get a radon test. They've come to an agreement that this is a reasonable standard to get a snapshot and a good idea.
Just an indicator.
Okay,
It's
so
an
that's
indicator.
there's two. So if you lived in the house and you owned it and it had a system, if you were going to test again, you might go for a little better test. Usually, it's not a big increase in cost. It's just a different level of exposure.
To go back to the mitigation system, when I said some of them don't work like they're supposed to, even though they look like they appear to be working, they work about as well as any mechanical system can possibly work, frankly, but nothing is perfect, is what I'm trying to get at. So it takes a very easy test. A lot of agents will say, oh, it has a mitigation system. I say, it's all right, we're just going to test it.
But there's
We're gonna
another
test it
component to
well.
that too. Is we bought the house, we tested, it got a, we installed a mitigation system, and then we finished the basement.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So sometimes if you change the, the dynamics, that can happen. It's like putting the in-ground pool in the backyard, and then we got water in the basement. It's because you just took up all that soil space with something. So same thing with radon is, I tell people, look, if you think you're going to do the basement over, you might want to test again, because you're going to change, you're going to button this thing up, you're going to insulate the walls, you're going to make the windows better. You're going to change the dynamics here, and it may turn out that you might have been borderline before, but now you're positive.
Right. I just had one recently where you had the old single pane windows,
Yep.
and the door, it had no bulkhead, it just had a old, almost like a paneling door to
Yep.
the outside. So there was even a little crack, and I told them, you're not really going to get a very effective result
Yeah.
with the system the way it is, the house the way it is right now, not with a system. But I said, so we're going to do the test anyway because they wanted to, and it come up 0.8. I said, I don't know how much effect this extra air had on it, probably some. But if you do put in triple pane windows and you put in a thermal door, then you should retest it because you're tightening up that house. You follow me? So yeah, every situation's a little bit different, but the point is, just because it has a system doesn't mean it's always working. You need to test it periodically, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, whatever. So we do a lot of those. But go ahead. Sorry.
Years ago, I had new construction that came out at 20. So I know that a lot of builders now are doing all of the work ahead of time and at least putting the rough system in.
Correct.
Can you explain
Passive
that?
system. So some of the towns up here, I want to say Bill Rickard's one of them, Burlington, they're putting in code to put in a passive system, what they call a passive system, which is just the pipe. So Mike talked about this pipe, it's not freestanding, but it's a singular system. So what they do during construction, like all other piping, they put the pipe in place, they put it into the concrete, seal it, bring it up, put it in through the wall, and then out through the attic of the house. Okay, so it looks like another vent pipe, like a bathroom vent pipe, okay? They just leave it like that. That's all they need to do. They don't even have to extend it through the roof, actually. They just need to put that rough pipe in. So that way, now you don't have that system hanging off the house, number one.
Oh, yeah.
That's the reason for it. That's one of the reasons for it.
I think for the builder, it's a smart
It's
move.
a smart thing to do,
It
yeah.
goes from being a liability to a feature.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then now you have a buyer come in, you do your test, and it's under 4. Okay, well, sometimes the passive system works on its own. Not rare, but sometimes it does. Okay, that's great. So just remember, to test in another couple of years and make sure that it doesn't need the fan vacuum system put on it, because that's all they'll have to do is come in and put that on. So a lot of the towns are going to that. I think it's more of an aesthetic thing. Started off as an aesthetic thing, just so you didn't have these hanging off
So
the
you're
back
saying
of the
some
house.
of the towns are required?
So yeah, they're putting it into code, yeah.
There was a situation, this was years ago, well, it was way ahead of the curve. But right over near Dean Street, getting off 95, Dean Street in Norwood,
Sure.
right over that way.
Yeah.
As you get off on the left, there was a subdivision, and the first couple of houses had crazy numbers. And the building inspector said, look guys, just put the system in now. You have, I don't know if he had like 25 houses he was building. He told them, just put it in. He goes, we're not gonna fool around with this. Just put it in. And if you put it in during construction, what are the costs? It's PVC pipe, it's labor, and a
Right.
hole.
Right.
To do it the other ways, you gotta bore holes, you gotta cut concrete, you gotta get an electrician. So it was a smart move, and that was years ago when that happened. I was shocked they got on it like that. It was such a great thing, because no one after that had an issue.
And just for the new brokers too, sharing stories, pictures and images. I did one out on the Sudbury River in Lincoln, and it was a brand new $3 million home, new construction, beautiful place.
So it was a small place.
And the only thing that, the only punch list they had was it had a high rate on it, and it had 178. 178. People are like, what did you say? 178. What's it supposed to be? Below 4. So people say, well, it's never, you're not going to get those numbers. And we didn't know this really either until we started getting the monitors that we pick up versus sending out the vials. The lab knew this, before, that you can get numbers that high. We've had a couple of times where it's come in 199, the monitor only goes to 200. So most likely it was even higher than that. Now, the problem with it was, you have this beautiful home, if you were buying it, right, and you came up 180 and you put the system in, would you feel comfortable, like, all the time, at knowing that it was 180, even though you had that little gauge that showed you the system was working? Well, obviously this couple was not, because they called me back every month.
Yeah.
To retest it, we make sure the system is working. And I told them, I said, listen, it appears as though you have the resources to buy one of these. I go, if you get a little short, I'll help you out with it, but
you use one.
Yeah. So and he did, he bought one, but then it turned out that an agent knew this, knew that the street was really, really high. And as I got out of my car and I finally walked in behind houses and saw a mitigation system on every one of these homes in this little sort of street. So there's high pockets of it and whatnot, but there's always a solution to it. Like Mike said, another thing, if it comes in at just barely below 4, and people say, well, it's almost 4, what do I do? Like, it's almost 4, it's 3.8, it's 3.9. What do you do?
Well, that could be the high. It might be that it's 0.7.
Well, yeah, so you don't know, so you say, okay, so that's when you might go to what Mike referenced earlier was the alpha tracker, which is, so move into the house because you don't have any leverage in terms of having the seller put a system in, right? So move into the house, buy the house, whatever you're going to do. Then use this alpha tracker, a long-term testing unit that looks like a little donut, and you put it in the basement for 3 months to a year. Problem is you forget it, and then you have to do it over again for the next year. But you do that, and that way at least you have a better idea, and it makes you feel more comfortable. If the ultimate goal is to feel even more comfortable, and put in a mitigation system. But they'll only guarantee it to be below 2.0. Some of them even say 2.7. I rarely see it above 2 when I retest a new system. So that's about as low as you're going to get it though. So like it's never 0, 0. I've talked to a couple of customers that, I tried to help through the system, through the process, and they just didn't want any rate on at all. And I was like, well,
It's DS people.
I don't know what.
Yeah, I was going to say, just the understanding of it is a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah.
I mean, I have a friend whose wife, she's still doing fine, but she had lung cancer.
Yeah,
She actually had, she had a lung removed, and when they bought their house, he's like, look, he goes, we don't want anything to increase. We're talking percentages. We're not going to have granite countertops. Because we just want to remove every chance. So there's different levels of concern.
Right.
And that's more peace of mind. If she feels better living there because the number's almost dead 0, more power to her.
While we're on that subject, can you guys talk about your website and the references for people who have questions where they can go?
I want to give you one more radon story.
Well, I got one too though.
The guy smoking the cigarette next to the monitor when I come and pick it up. I hear that's dangerous, that radon.
Yeah.
I know, that's what I've read, you know what I mean? Okay, sorry.
Well, I just wanted, this relates to broker, kind of the broker life. So, because you guys are going to have to,
Let's go back to LAER.
you're going to have to, okay, you're going to have to handle the, how you approach this. So what happens is, we do the inspection, they put down the radon canister, vials, test, whatever it is, it comes back at 4.2. So the buyer's like, well, I'd like to work something out here, I'd like a mediation system. And the seller says, well, and they start delving down to get on the internet, because the internet's the source of all good information. And they said, this wasn't a perfect test. We were in the house, and we opened and closed the door. So they start picking apart the process. And what they misunderstand is, as I said earlier, I can't ask you to move out for 2 days. This is for the buyer to try to get some information about what's going on. Yeah. So what they do is they pick apart our methodology, or it didn't matter the test, whoever did the test, and they say, I don't think it's that high. I think you people have made a mistake and it's going to be lower. Yeah. And we just laugh because what usually happens. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a 4.2, they test, they get like a 12. They get like a 12. Yeah. So it's one of those, it holds up the progress, yes. And it usually doesn't pan out. It's, it's one of those things that we're not doing this, we're not, I'm not vindictive. I'm not here to get a number.
Right.
But what happens is it's the same thing when it's 3.9. The buyer's like, well, how do I know that it's not going to be 4.2 tomorrow?
Yeah.
You don't. But
Before we go on to the website, we
Yeah.
forgot to talk about radon in the water.
yeah, well, I was kind of, I had three things. The second one I had, just a real quick story. The other day I had to go over to my mother's friend's house. They live in a house doesn't have a full basement. It's one of these.
Yeah.
Okay, it's one of these.
Yep.
And the husband has a full wood shop down there.
Wow.
And
How's
he has
he do it?
a lot of it. He sits in a chair with wheels.
Yes.
And I've seen it I've seen it, a lot of front to backs. They have kind of a deep. I've seen guys who have whole workshops, like they roll around on like one of those brake, the things, the wheels for fixing brakes.
Okay.
So this guy had a really nice wood shop, and his wife was like, "You're down there every night," and he makes all sorts of crazy things. And she's like, "He's retired and spends every day down there." She goes, "Do you think I should check for radon?" Yeah, you might. I don't know. Maybe he's pretty old now. I don't know. Maybe you don't want to, But so that's what it was. One of those things. You talk about lowest livable level.
Yeah.
You never know. So what happens is, we've been in houses where the guy right off the bat, the husband and wife says, she says, "This is going to be my crafting space." And you're like, "This is nuts. This is not pleasant." But they may want to test it.
Yeah.
And what do you do then? It's not really a livable level, but they plan on using it. I test it. And the reason is, that's not my place to...
Yeah, that's for them.
If it's a dirt
I'll
floor,
tell
or
them.
if it's all that stuff.
And if you're gonna get a better test, then if you're gonna be up on the first floor and it's summertime,
Yeah.
and all the windows are open, at least
You gotta do what you gotta do.
some type of test.
Yeah. So that's major sin. Sorry, guys. And
Generally speaking, you wanna go with that it's 50% off each level, by the way.
Yeah.
From the basement up.
Yeah.
Okay.
that's why we don't
Can I go over
do
that?
radon testing in apartment buildings, that kind of stuff.
We don't do that. And then Susan just asked about radon on the water.
So it's always, for me, it's always good, pictures and images. I tied in with someone. I have a friend who bought a vacation property in Maine, and we went up and I did the inspection on it. No licensing in Maine. You can go do whatever you like. And I did a radon test, and there was some big numbers. And so they were talking. So because I'm not from up there, they had a guy come out to remediate, and he's like, "No," he says, "it's the radon in the water." And they say that if you get big numbers,
Yeah, out of water.
a lot of times it's in the water, because when you have a shower, you turn the shower on, what happens is the water comes out, but the radon's released. So that was their source of radon. So radon in the water can take place. We've had a couple over
Any
the
water,
years.
even
Yeah,
the
no, but I mean,
dishwasher.
it's
or
whenever
anything.
the sink and any of that stuff, whenever it aerates, it becomes effervescent.
Yeah.
It allows
That's interesting.
it allows the
Yeah, that's
radon to escape.
Yeah,
So-
I had that in a house in Hopkinton.
That's where we were out in but we were out near there. That was the place we kind of in that ballpark.
Yeah.
And what happened was the number was, and it turned out it was in the water. And so if you test, sometimes if no one's living there and no one's been in there running the water for a long time, the number might be okay, because they're pulling the water from 600 feet. That's a whole different world. So you might test. So it's a real funny business, but usually you have to be on well water for it to happen. So well water first, and then move on from there. The system that they use to remediate, one of them is the one that I've seen most often, it's not often, is they basically just kind of tumble the water down. It almost looks like a filter for a fish tank. You know what I mean? But it takes up a lot of space. So what they do is they tumble the water through, and it releases the gases, and they get vented out, and then the water gets used in the house. It's kind of, but that's something, radon in water, usually if it happens, most people in the neighborhood know already, because everyone hits the same aquifer. So it's usually known, but you usually get, if you have it and people are living in the house, it'll be a big number, because showers, the sink, whatever's going on, it releases it pretty readily.
Yeah, they say it doesn't have much medical concern for ingesting radon, but I don't really want to test it either.
Yeah.
That's your guys.
The other thing with the radon is it's in that transition you talked about, it becomes a gas, then it goes back to a particle.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. It has they talk about the half-life,
Half-life, yeah.
and it's a sister. It's really just, it's at that point where it can lodge in the skin, in the lung, that it's dangerous.
Correct.
It's not
Correct.
dangerous coming, it's not dangerous
Correct.
going,
Yes.
but it's that small window when it's a particle, and it can lodge in the lung tissue.
We just covered it in case there's any scientists out there.
Yeah, well, I hope I
Very
didn't.
nice.
Yeah, really.
The, speaking of that, I just lost my thought. Go ahead, Mike.
Website and resources.
website resources, that, I
Is that
mean,
me?
yeah, we have the links.
Well, we get links to.
No, for everything, just so that, I mean, when you're finished with your speech to a buyer,
Yeah.
you're gonna tell him how the home inspection will be coming to him, and then
Oh,
say
yeah.
you can also go on our website and whatever.
We are, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I mean, as the home inspector, I usually let them know that they're gonna receive the report, you know, later that day. It's gonna be emailed to them. We do have resources on our website, you know, links to the EPA, there's stuff about asbestos, different, you know, all sorts of different items.
Yeah, we also have our marketing information, excuse me, Mike. We have a maintenance, what we call a maintenance manual. You wanna speak to this, Mike?
Yeah.
I mean, the maintenance manual basically is all the things you'll never do in your house.
Yeah, you can use it as a checklist.
It's a checklist, but I mean, it's good for information for new agents especially. And then we have information on wood boring insects, infestation, was the word I was trying to come up with, that Mike loves talking about, the difference between termites and Susan's like cutting me off right now going like, we're not gonna talk about carpenter ants.
Can you also talk
Well, I wanna
about,
talk about carpenter bees, no, I'm kidding.
can we talk about setting the agents up on your site? I forget how that works.
In terms of what? In terms of, when you say,
Yeah.
you say setting the agents up?
You reached out to each of the agents the last time and said you can, somehow you can be part of our
Well, we have, oh yeah, so we're on Facebook, number one. I mean, I'm not sure if this is where we're getting to, but we keep a database of all the agents that have used us in the past. We keep their information, and right now it's about every quarter that we'll send out a Facebook blast, you know, just kind of common information that we have. To us is common, but to other people isn't. So joining Facebook with us, that's when we give some of our technical, we are heading in that direction anyway. We were a little slow to move on the social media thing, but we're starting to get up to speed. We hired one of the customer service gals that you know, worked on the phones, and she's a millennial, so she knows.
So
she
translates
knows what she's doing.
She translates for us.
She helped us a little bit get to these, but we have I believe we're going on what's the other one? Snapchat? No, there's another one. Instagram. Yeah, the Instagram one, which is a good one. So that's if that is your question, that's how you can get hooked up with us.
Yeah.
Is just join us on Facebook, and.
Because if the agents have questions, you know, whether it's before they go into a particular situation or something they want to know more about.
We are open every day. We're on the phones 8 to 10 p.m. We're always on our cell phones. We're pretty much always
No,
available.
but I mean,
even on, you know.
the people that started the company, one of the things they
Yeah.
found that separated us from a lot of other people doing this is they said, we always want you to have, when you call, you're gonna get a live person. So it is from 8 in the morning to 10 at night, 7 days a week.
7 days a week, yeah.
And what happens is, if you have a question, and you know, whether it's urgent or not urgent, I mean, I field questions from all sorts of characters, people. I mean, we get people who say, I'm not buying or selling my house, there's something wrong with my house, but if I ever need an inspection, I'll use you. You know, I'll answer your questions. That's the thing, is just call. You'll get some, this gentleman, Bill Delaney, there's me, Mike Healy, any of the Rizzos. So there's always someone to answer your questions.
You know, just to throw this caveat in there, when Sean and Jay's mother and father started the company, like Mike said, there was always somebody available to answer the phone. So Pat Rizzo at 10 o'clock, Sean's mother, would put call forwarding. We were in the advanced stages of telephones back then. Put call forwarding on, so at 2 in the morning when somebody called to leave a message for Tiger Home Inspection, she would sit up in bed and go, Pat Rizzo, Tiger Home Inspection. But it was always like, when we got cell phones, Pat was like, hey, I don't understand why you have a cell phone if you don't answer it. I don't understand. Like I said, well, maybe I'm talking to somebody, Pat. It's inexcusable, like not to.
Yeah.
So the point is, if you guys or any agents out there have a question, call us. Yeah. The office is relentless in calling. Relentless in calling us until they get in touch with us. So any questions anybody has, we're always available. It's what we're here for.
Yeah, that's great to know on the weekends, because so many times on Friday, people will say to us, have a nice weekend. I'm like, we're still working Saturday and Sunday.
Exactly. Yeah.
When someone interviews with us, because I do a lot of the interviewing, I go over and over and over. I said, you do understand, in a sense, this is a retail business. I said, people want to do this when they're not working. So you have to understand, we work on Saturdays. We have guys who've been with us for 25 years. They work on Saturdays. It's not gonna change. This is the job. Because we used to do Saturdays and Sundays. We found that Sundays were actually a little soft. Like we really thought it was, and we used to do pretty good business. But it really turned out to be that Sundays were a little, people want to do this on Saturday. They don't want to miss a day of work. I'm trying to buy a house. I need every dollar I can,
Well, the other thing is if the client is reviewing the report that you've sent and they have a question about something or a concern, if they can call.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, now with email too, because the report's emailed, you just email right back, so that you have the inspector's email too.
Yeah.
So it's that whole, that's all been shortened. That third person, the triangle of the office is even removed now. Yep.
So you're in Braintree's the main?
That's where the office is, but
Okay, yeah, because I just went on Facebook to like it, and
Yeah.
Oh, see?
yeah.
She
See,
already
look at
liked
that,
you
to
on
like it, look at that, that's
Facebook.
awesome.
Yeah.
So
Thank you for that.
the thing that happens though is, our office is in Braintree, and back when we were, doing paper reports and all that stuff, everything gets shipped out of there. But the way we treat it is each of our guys has his own territory, and it's not etched in stone, but we want our guys to kind of know where they're doing inspection, because different areas have different characteristics. We want to develop a following. We want friends and relatives and anyone under the sun to recommend them. So each guy really kind of has his own little business. We have guys that haven't been in the office in years. We have continuing ed seminars. We see each other a number of times a year. We're always available for questions and answers. This is, inspector to inspector. But, Braintree's where our office is, but we really hope that each guy kind of is felt as kind of the inspector in his territory. It is tough for us in Rhode Island because we're from another state. And as soon as, even Southern New Hampshire, it's as soon as they, you carpetbaggers, you're coming in to make money on us, But our guys are from Rhode Island. They're from New Hampshire, So it's a tricky part of the business.
So thank you, both of you, for being here. Tiger Home Inspection is a great resource. Again, I think one of the most important things is that they're available 24/7, just like we work. And we have offices all over the state, and we're now covering Rhode Island and Southern New Hampshire, so it's nice to know that they cover these areas as well. And we will have them back many times, so thank you again.
No, thank you.
Just wanted to tell everyone that tomorrow we will be talking about open house strategies and building your database. And again, check Jostle out, because I put the link on there, and you can always go into Jostle and events and register for the classes, and you can go back to looking at the video after the fact in YouTube, LAER Training. Thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah.